My name is Frances Townsend, and I'm 22 years old. 2 weeks ago, I stood on a graduation stage in front of 3,000 people, while my parents, the same people who refused to pay for my education because I wasn't worth the investment, sat in the front row with their faces drained of all color. They came to watch my twin sister graduate. They had no idea I was even there. They certainly didn't know I'd be the one giving the keynote speech. But this story doesn't begin at graduation. It begins 4 years earlier, in my parents' living room, when my father looked me straight in the eyes and said something I will never forget. Before I continue, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy this story. And let me know in the comments, where are you watching from, and what time is it there? Now let me take you back to that summer evening in 2021. The acceptance letters arrived on the same Tuesday afternoon in April. Victoria got into Whitmore University, a prestigious private school with a price tag of $65,000 a year. I got into Eastbrook State, a solid public university. $25,000 annually, still expensive but manageable. That evening, Dad called a family meeting in the living room. "We need to discuss finances," he said, settling into his leather armchair like a CEO addressing shareholders. Mom sat on the couch, hands folded. Victoria stood by the window, already glowing with anticipation. I sat across from Dad, still clutching my acceptance letter. "Victoria," Dad began, "we'll cover your full tuition at Whitmore. Room, board, everything." Victoria squealed. Mom smiled. Then Dad turned to me. "Frances, we've decided not to fund your education." The words didn't register at first. "I'm sorry?" "Victoria has leadership potential. She networks well. She'll marry well, build connections. It's an investment that makes sense." He paused, and what came next felt like a knife sliding between my ribs. "You're smart, Frances, but you're not special. There's no return on investment with you." I looked at Mom. She wouldn't meet my eyes. I looked at Victoria. She was already texting someone, probably sharing the good news about Whitmore. So I just figure it out myself? Dad shrugged. "You're resourceful. You'll manage." That night, I didn't cry. I'd cried enough over the years, over missed birthdays, hand-me-down gifts, being cropped out of family photos. Instead, I sat in my room and realized something that changed everything. To my parents, I wasn't their daughter. I was a bad investment. But what Dad didn't know, what nobody in this family knew, was that his decision would alter the course of my entire life. And 4 years later, he'd face the consequences in front of thousands. The thing is, this wasn't new. The favoritism had always been there, woven into the fabric of our family like an ugly pattern everyone pretended not to see. When we turned 16, Victoria got a brand new Honda Civic with a red bow on top. I got her old laptop, the one with a cracked screen and a battery that lasted 40 minutes. "We can't afford two cars," Mom had said apologetically. But they could afford Victoria's ski trips, her designer prom dress, her summer abroad in Spain. Family vacations were the worst. Victoria always got her own hotel room. I slept on pull-out couches, in hallways, once even in a closet that the resort called a cozy nook. In every family photo, Victoria stood center frame, glowing. I was always at the edge, sometimes partially cut off like an afterthought. When I finally asked Mom about it, I was 17, desperate for answers. She just sighed. "Sweetheart, you're imagining things. We love you both the same." But actions don't lie. A few months before the college decision, I found Mom's phone unlocked on the kitchen counter. A text thread with Aunt Linda was open. I shouldn't have read it, but I did. "Poor Frances," Mom had written. "But Harold's right. She doesn't stand out. We have to be practical." I put the phone down and walked away. That night, I made a decision I told no one about. Not because I wanted revenge, because I wanted to prove something to myself. I opened my laptop, the cracked one with the dying battery, and typed into the search bar, "Full scholarships for independent students." The results loaded slowly, but what I found would change everything. I did the math at 2 a.m., sitting on my bedroom floor with a notebook and a calculator. Eastbrook State, $25,000 per year. 4 years, $100,000. Parents' contribution, $0. My savings from summer jobs, $2,300. The gap was staggering. If I couldn't close it, I had 3 options. Drop out before I even started. Take on 6 figures of student debt that would follow me for decades. Or go part-time, stretching a 4-year degree into 7 or 8 while working full-time. Every path led to the same place, becoming exactly what my father said I was. The failure. The bad investment. The twin who didn't make it. I could already hear the family conversations at Thanksgiving. Victoria's doing so well at Whitmore. Frances? Oh, she's still figuring things out. But this wasn't just about proving them wrong. It was about proving myself right. I scrolled through scholarship databases until my eyes burned. Most required recommendations, essays, proof of financial need. Some were scams. Others had deadlines that had already passed. Then I found something. Eastbrook had a merit scholarship program for first-generation and independent students. Full tuition coverage plus a living stipend. The catch? Only 5 students per year were selected. The competition was brutal. I saved the link. Then I kept scrolling. And that's when I first saw the name that would eventually change my life. The Whitfield Scholarship. Full ride, $10,000 annually for living expenses. Awarded to only 20 students nationwide. I laughed out loud. 20 students in the entire country. What chance did I have? But I bookmarked it anyway. I had 2 choices: accept the life my parents designed for me or design my own. I chose the second. But to do that, I needed a plan. And I needed it immediately. I filled an entire notebook that summer. Every page was a calculation. Every margin was covered in plans. Job number 1, barista at the morning grind, a campus cafe. Shift, 5 to 8 a.m. Estimated monthly income, $800. Job number 2, cleaning crew for the residence halls. Weekends only, $400 a month. Job number 3, teaching assistant for the economics department if I could land it, another $300. Total, $1,500 per month, roughly $18,000 a year. Still $7,000 short of tuition. That gap would have to come from scholarships, merit-based ones. The kind you earn, not the kind you're handed. I found the cheapest housing option within walking distance of campus, a tiny room in a house shared with 4 other students. $300 a month, utilities included. No parking, no AC, no privacy. It would have to do. My schedule crystallized into something brutal but precise. 5 a.m. Work at the cafe. 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Classes. 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. Study, work, or TA duties. Sleep. 11 p.m. to 4 a.m. 4 to 5 hours a night. For 4 years. The week before I left for college, Victoria posted photos from her Cancun trip with friends. Sunset beaches, margaritas, laughter. I was packing my thrift store comforter into a second-hand suitcase. Our lives were already diverging, and we hadn't even started yet. But here's what kept me going. Every night before sleep, I'd whisper the same thing to myself. This is the price of freedom. Freedom from their expectations. Freedom from their judgment. Freedom from needing their approval. I didn't know then how right I'd be, and I didn't know that somewhere on the Eastbrook campus, there was a professor who would see something in me that my own parents never could. Freshman year Thanksgiving. I sat alone in my tiny rented room, phone pressed to my ear, listening to the sounds of home. Laughter in the background, the clink of dishes, the warm chaos of a family gathering I wasn't part of. Hello, Frances? Mom's voice was distant, distracted. Hi, Mom. Happy Thanksgiving. Oh, yes, happy Thanksgiving, honey. How are you? I'm okay. Is Dad there? Can I talk to him? A pause. Then I heard his voice in the background, muffled but clear. Tell her I'm busy. The words landed like stones. Mom's voice returned, artificially bright. Your father's just in the middle of something. Victoria was telling the funniest story. It's fine, Mom. Are you eating enough? Do you need anything? I looked around my room, at the instant ramen on my desk, at the second-hand blanket, at the textbook I'd borrowed from the library because I couldn't afford to buy it. No, Mom, I don't need anything. Okay, well, we love you. Love you too. I hung up. Then I opened Facebook. The first thing in my feed was a photo Victoria had just posted. Mom, Dad, and Victoria at the dining table, candles lit, turkey gleaming. The caption? Thankful for my amazing family. My amazing family. I zoomed in on the photo. 3 place settings, 3 chairs, not 4. They hadn't even set a place for me. I sat there for a long time, staring at that image. Something shifted inside me that night. The ache I'd carried for years, the longing for their approval, their attention, their love. It didn't disappear, but it changed. It hollowed out. And where the pain used to be, there was only quiet emptiness. Strangely, that emptiness gave me something the pain never had. Clarity. Second semester freshman year, Microeconomics 101. Dr. Margaret Smith was legendary at Eastbrook. 30 years of teaching, published in every major journal, terrifying reputation. Students whispered that she hadn't given an A in 5 years. I sat in the 3rd row, took meticulous notes, and turned in my first essay expecting a B- at best. The paper came back with 2 letters at the top, A+. Beneath the grade was a note in red ink. See me after class. My heart dropped. What did I do wrong? After the lecture, I approached her desk. Dr. Smith was already packing her bag, silver hair pulled back in a severe bun, reading glasses perched on her nose. Frances Townsend? Yes, ma'am. Sit down. I sat. She looked at me over her glasses. This essay is one of the best pieces of undergraduate writing I've seen in 20 years. Where did you study before this? Nowhere special. Public high school. Nothing advanced. And your family? Academics? I hesitated. My family doesn't support my education, financially or otherwise. The words came out before I could stop them. Dr. Smith set down her pen. Tell me more. So I did. For the first time, I told someone the whole story. The favoritism, the rejection, the 3 jobs, the 4 hours of sleep. All of it. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that changed my trajectory forever. Have you heard of the Whitfield Scholarship? I nodded slowly. I've seen it, but it's impossible. 20 students nationwide, she said. Full ride, living stipend, and the recipients at partner schools give the commencement address at graduation. She leaned forward. Frances, you have potential. Extraordinary potential. But potential means nothing if no one sees it. Let me help you be seen. The next 2 years blurred into a relentless rhythm. Wake at 4 a.m., coffee shop by 5, classes by 9, library until midnight, sleep, repeat. I missed every party, every football game, every late-night pizza run. While other students built memories, I built a GPA, 4.0, 6 semesters straight. There were moments I almost broke. Once I fainted during a shift at the cafe. Exhaustion, the doctor said. Dehydration. I was back at work the next day. Another time I sat in my car. Rebecca's car, actually. She'd lent it to me for a job interview, and cried for 20 minutes. Not because anything specific had happened, just because everything had happened, all at once, for years. But I kept going. Junior year, Dr. Smith called me into her office. I'm nominating you for the Whitfield. I stared at her. You're serious? 10 essays, 3 rounds of interviews. It'll be the hardest thing you've ever done. She paused. But you've already survived harder. The application consumed 3 months of my life. Essays about resilience, leadership, vision, phone interviews with panels of professors, background checks, reference letters. Somewhere in the middle of it, Victoria texted me, first time in months. Mom says you don't come home for Christmas anymore? That's kinda sad, TBH. I read the message. Then I put my phone face down and went back to my essay. The truth? I couldn't afford a plane ticket, but even if I could, I wasn't sure I wanted to go. That Christmas, I sat alone in my rented room with a cup of instant noodles and a tiny paper Christmas tree Rebecca had made me. No family, no presents, no drama. It was somehow the most peaceful holiday I'd ever had. The email arrived at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in September, senior year. Subject: Whitfield Foundation. Final round notification. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely scroll. Dear Ms. Townsend, congratulations. Out of 200 applicants, you have been selected as one of 50 finalists for the Whitfield Scholarship. The final round will consist of an in-person interview at our New York headquarters. 50 finalists, 20 winners. I had a 40% chance, if all things were equal. But things were never equal. The interview was scheduled for a Friday, in New York, 800 miles away. I checked my bank account. $847. A last-minute flight would cost $400 minimum. A hotel would eat the rest. And I had rent due in 2 weeks. I was about to close the laptop when Rebecca knocked on my door. Frankie, you look like you saw a ghost. I showed her the email. She screamed. Literally screamed. You're going, she said. End of discussion. Beck, I can't afford... Bus ticket, $53, leaves Thursday night, arrives Friday morning. I'll lend you the money. I can't ask you to... You're not asking. I'm telling. She grabbed my shoulders. Frankie, this is your shot. You don't get another one. So I took the bus. 8 hours overnight, arriving in Manhattan at 5 a.m. with a stiff neck and a borrowed blazer from the thrift store. The interview waiting room was full of polished candidates. Designer bags. Parents hovering nearby. Easy confidence. I looked down at my second-hand outfit. My scuffed shoes. I don't belong here, I thought. Then I remembered Dr. Smith's words. You don't need to belong. You need to show them you deserve to. 2 weeks after the interview, I was walking to my morning shift when my phone buzzed. Subject: Whitfield Scholarship. Decision. I stopped in the middle of the sidewalk. A cyclist swerved around me, cursing. I didn't hear him. I opened the email. Dear Ms. Townsend, we are pleased to inform you that you have been selected as a Whitfield Scholar for the class of 2025. I read it 3 times, then a 4th. Then I sat down on the curb and cried. Not quiet tears. Ugly, heaving sobs that made strangers stare. 3 years of exhaustion, loneliness, and grinding determination poured out of me right there on the sidewalk outside the morning grind. I was a Whitfield Scholar. Full tuition. $10,000 a year for living expenses. And the right to transfer to any partner university in their network. That night, Dr. Smith called me personally. Francis, I just got the notification. I'm so proud of you. Thank you for everything. There's something else, she said. The Whitfield allows you to transfer to a partner school for your final year. Whitmore University is on the list. Whitmore, Victoria's school. If you transfer, Dr. Smith continued, you'd graduate with their top honors, and the Whitfield Scholar delivers the commencement speech. My breath caught. Francis, you'd be valedictorian. You'd speak at graduation in front of everyone. I thought about my parents, about them sitting in the audience for Victoria's big day, completely unaware I was there. I'm not doing this for revenge, I said quietly. I know. I'm doing it because Whitmore has the better program for my career. I know that too. I pause. But if they happen to see you shine, that's just a bonus. I made my decision that night, and I told no one in my family. 3 weeks into my final semester at Whitmore, it happened. I was in the library, third floor, tucked into a corner carrel with my constitutional law textbook, when I heard a voice that made my stomach drop. Oh my God. Francis? I looked up. Victoria stood 3 feet away, a half-empty iced latte in her hand, mouth hanging open. What are you? How are you? She couldn't form a complete sentence. I closed my book calmly. Hi, Victoria. You go here? Since when? Mom and Dad didn't say. Mom and Dad don't know. She blinked. What do you mean they don't know? Exactly what I said. They don't know I'm here. Victoria set her coffee down, still staring at me like I'd materialized from thin air. But how? They're not paying for. How did you? I paid for it myself. For Whitmore. I transferred. Scholarship. The word hung between us. Victoria's expression shifted. Confusion, disbelief, and something else. Something that looked almost like shame. Why didn't you tell anyone? I looked at her. My twin sister. The one who'd gotten everything I'd been denied. The one who'd never asked, not once in 4 years, how I was surviving. Did you ever ask? She opened her mouth, closed it. I gathered my books. I need to get to class. Francis, wait. She grabbed my arm. Do you hate us? The family? I looked at her hand on my sleeve, then at her face. No, I said quietly. You can't hate people you've stopped caring about. I pulled my arm free and walked away. That night, my phone lit up with missed calls. Mom, Dad, Victoria again. I silenced them all. Whatever was coming, it would happen on my terms, not theirs. Victoria called them immediately. I know because she told me later when everything was over. She's here, Victoria had said, barely through the door of her apartment. Frances is at Whitmore. She's been here since September. According to Victoria, the silence on the other end lasted a full 10 seconds. Then Dad's voice. That's impossible. She doesn't have the money. She said scholarship. What scholarship? She's not scholarship material. Dad, I saw her in the library. I'll handle this. Dad called me the next morning. First time he'd dialed my number in 3 years. Francis, we need to talk. About what? Victoria says you're at Whitmore. You transferred without telling us? I didn't think you'd care. A pause. Of course I care. You're my daughter. Am I? The words came out flat, not bitter, just factual. You told me I wasn't worth the investment. Remember that? Silence. Francis, That was 4 years ago, in the living room. You said I wasn't special, that there was no return on investment with me. I don't remember saying. I do. More silence. Then. We should discuss this in person, at graduation. We're coming for Victoria's ceremony and. I know. You know? I'll see you there, Dad. I hung up. He didn't call back. That night, I sat in my small apartment, the one I'd paid for myself with money I'd earned, and thought about that conversation. He didn't remember, or he chose not to remember. Either way, he'd never actually seen me. Not really, but in 3 months he would. And when that moment came, it wouldn't be because I forced him to look. It would be because he couldn't look away. The weeks before graduation became a strange kind of quiet. I knew they were coming. Mom, Dad, Victoria, the whole perfect family unit, descending on campus to celebrate Victoria's big achievement. They'd booked a hotel, planned a dinner, ordered flowers. For her. They still didn't know the full picture. Victoria had told them I was at Whitmore, but she didn't know about the Whitfield. She didn't know about the valedictorian honor. She didn't know I'd been asked to deliver the commencement address. Dr. Smith called to check in. She'd made the trip to watch. Do you want me to notify your family about the speech? No. Francis, I want them to hear it when everyone else does. She was quiet for a moment. This isn't about making them feel bad? No, I said honestly. It's about telling my truth. If they happen to be in the audience, that's their business. Rebecca drove up for the ceremony. She helped me pick out a dress. The first new piece of clothing I'd bought in 2 years that wasn't from a thrift store. Navy blue, simple, elegant. You look like a CEO, she said. I feel like I'm going to throw up. Same thing, probably. The night before graduation, I couldn't sleep. Not from nerves, not exactly. I kept wondering, what would I feel when I saw them? Would the old pain come rushing back? Would I want them to hurt the way I'd hurt? I stared at the ceiling until 3 a.m. searching for answers. What I found surprised me. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want them to suffer. I just wanted to be free. And tomorrow, one way or another, I would be. Hey, I want to pause here for a second. If you've ever been underestimated by your own family, if you know what it feels like to work twice as hard for half the recognition, type "same" in the comments. I want to know how many of us have been through this. And if you're enjoying the story so far, hit that like button. It really helps. Now, back to graduation morning. May 17th. Bright sun. Perfect blue sky. The kind of weather that felt almost ironic. Whitmore's stadium seated 3,000. By 9 a.m., it was nearly full, families pouring through the gates, flowers and balloons everywhere, the hum of excited conversation filling the air. I arrived early, slipping in through the faculty entrance. My regalia was different from the other graduates. Standard black gown, yes, but across my shoulders lay the gold sash of valedictorian. Pinned to my chest was the Whitfield Scholar Medallion, its bronze surface catching the morning light. I took my seat in the VIP section at the front of the stage area, reserved for honors students, for speakers. 20 feet away, in the general graduate section, Victoria was taking selfies with her friends. She hadn't seen me yet. And in the front row of the audience, dead center, best seats in the house, sat my parents. Dad wore his navy suit, the one he saved for important occasions. Mom had on a cream-colored dress, a massive bouquet of roses in her lap. Between them sat an empty chair, probably reserved for coats and purses. Not for me. Never for me. Dad was fiddling with his camera, adjusting settings, preparing to capture Victoria's moment. Mom was smiling, waving at someone across the aisle. They looked so happy, so proud. They had no idea. The university president approached the podium. The crowd hushed. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Whitmore University's class of 2025 commencement ceremony. Applause. Cheers. I sat perfectly still, hands folded in my lap. In a few minutes, they would call my name, and everything would change. I looked once more at my parents, at their expectant faces, their cameras ready for Victoria's shining moment. Soon, I thought. Soon, you'll finally see me. The ceremony proceeded in waves. Welcome address, acknowledgements, honorary degrees, the usual pageantry that stretches time like taffy. Then the university president returned to the podium. And now, it is my great honor to introduce this year's valedictorian and Whitfield Scholar. I felt my heart rate spike. A student who has demonstrated extraordinary resilience, academic excellence, and strength of character. In the audience, my mother leaned over to whisper something to my father. He nodded, adjusting his camera lens, pointed at Victoria. Please join me in welcoming Frances Townsend. For one suspended moment, nothing happened. Then I stood. 3,000 pairs of eyes turned toward me. I walked toward the podium, my heels clicking against the stage floor, the gold sash swaying with each step. The Whitfield medallion gleamed against my chest. And in the front row, I watched my parents' faces transform. Dad's hand froze on his camera. Mom's bouquet slipped sideways. Confusion first. Who is that? Then recognition. Wait, is that? Then shock. It can't be. Then nothing but pale, stricken silence. Victoria's head snapped toward the stage. Her jaw dropped. I saw her mouth my name. Francis? I reached the podium, adjusted the microphone. 3,000 people applauded. My parents didn't. They just sat there, frozen, as if someone had pressed pause on their entire world. For the first time in my life, they were looking at me. Really looking. Not at Victoria, not through me. At me. I let the applause fade. Then I leaned into the microphone. Good morning, everyone. My voice was steady, calm. 4 years ago, I was told I wasn't worth the investment. In the front row, my mother's hand flew to her mouth. Dad's camera hung useless at his side. And I began to speak. I was told I didn't have what it takes. My voice carried across the stadium, amplified by the sound system, steady as a heartbeat. I was told to expect less from myself because others expected less from me. 3,000 people sat in perfect silence. So I learned to expect more. I spoke about the 3 jobs, the 4 hours of sleep, the instant ramen dinners, and the secondhand textbooks. I spoke about what it meant to build something from nothing, not because you wanted to prove anyone wrong, but because you needed to prove yourself right. I didn't name names. I didn't point fingers. I didn't need to. The greatest gift I received wasn't financial support or encouragement. It was the chance to discover who I am without anyone's validation. In the front row, my mother was crying. Not the proud, joyful tears of a graduation ceremony, something raw, something that looked like grief. My father sat motionless, staring at the podium like he was seeing a stranger. Maybe he was. To anyone who has ever been told you're not enough, I paused, letting the words settle. You are. You always have been. I looked out at the sea of faces, at the other graduates who'd struggled, at the parents who'd sacrificed, at the friends who'd believed, and yes, at my own family, sitting in the front row like statues. I am not here because someone believed in me. I am here because I learned to believe in myself. The applause that followed was thunderous. People rose to their feet. Standing ovation. 3,000 people cheering for a girl they'd never met. I stepped back from the podium, and as I descended the stage, I saw James Whitfield III waiting at the bottom. But he wasn't the only one. The reception area buzzed with champagne and congratulations. I was shaking hands with the dean when I saw them approaching. My parents, moving through the crowd like they were wading through water. Dad reached me first. Francis. His voice was hoarse. Why didn't you tell us? I accepted a glass of sparkling water from a passing server, took a sip. Did you ever ask? He opened his mouth, closed it. Mom arrived beside him, mascara streaked down her cheeks. Baby, I'm so sorry, we didn't know. So sorry. You knew. I kept my voice even. You chose not to see. That's not fair, Dad started. Fair? The word came out calm, not sharp. You told me I wasn't worth investing in. You paid $250,000 for Victoria's education and told me to figure it out myself. That's what happened. Mom reached for me. I stepped back. Francis, please. I'm not angry, I said. And I meant it. The anger had burned away years ago, replaced by something cleaner. But I'm not the same person who left your house 4 years ago. Dad's jaw tightened. I made a mistake. I said things I shouldn't have. You said what you believed. I met his eyes. You were right about one thing, though. I wasn't worth the investment, not to you, but I was worth every sacrifice I made for myself. He flinched like I'd struck him. James Whitfield III appeared at my elbow, extending his hand. Miss Townsend, brilliant speech. The foundation is proud to have you. I shook his hand while my parents watched. The founder of one of the nation's most prestigious scholarships, treating their worthless daughter like a treasure. I saw it hit them then. the full weight of what they'd missed, what they'd thrown away. After Mr. Whitfield moved on, I turned back to my parents. They looked smaller somehow, diminished. "I'm not going to pretend everything's fine," I said. "Because it's not." "Francis, please," Mom whispered. "Can we just talk? As a family?" "We are talking. I mean really talk. Come home for the summer, let us—" "No." The word was firm but not harsh. "I have a job in New York. I start in 2 weeks. I won't be coming home." Dad stepped forward. "You're cutting us off? Just like that?" "I'm setting boundaries." I kept my voice steady. "There's a difference." "What do you want from us?" His voice cracked. For the first time in my life, I saw my father look lost. "Tell me what you want, and I'll do it." I considered the question. Really considered it. "I don't want anything from you anymore. That's the point." I took a breath. "But if you want to talk, really talk, you can call me. I might answer, I might not. It depends on whether you're calling to apologize or to make yourself feel better." Mom was crying again. "We love you, Francis. We've always loved you." "Maybe," I said. "But love isn't just words, it's choices, and you made yours." Victoria appeared at the edge of our circle, hovering uncertainly. "Francis." She hesitated. "Congratulations." "Thank you." No hug, no tearful reconciliation, but no cruelty either. "I'll call you sometime," I told her. "If you want." She nodded, eyes wet. "I'd like that." I turned and walked away. Not running, not escaping, just moving forward. Dr. Smith was waiting by the exit, a quiet smile on her face. "You did well," she said. "I'm free," I replied. And for the first time in my life, I meant it. The ripples started before my parents even left campus. At the reception, I watched it happen. Watched the slow realization spread through the crowd of family, friends, and acquaintances. Mrs. Patterson from the country club approached my mother. "Diane, I didn't know Francis went to Whitmore. And Whitfield Scholar? You must be so proud." My mother's smile looked like it hurt. "Yes, we're very proud." "How on earth did you keep it a secret? If my daughter won that, I'd have it on billboards." My mother didn't have an answer. Over the following weeks, the questions multiplied. Dad's business partners asked about me. "Saw your daughter's speech online. Incredible story. You must have really pushed her to excel." He couldn't tell them the truth, that he'd done the opposite. Victoria called me 3 days after graduation. "Mom hasn't stopped crying. Dad barely talks. He just sits there." "I'm sorry to hear that." "Are you?" I thought about it. I don't want them to suffer, but I'm not responsible for their feelings. Silence on the line. "Francis, I'm sorry. I should have asked. I should have paid attention. I was so wrapped up in my own stuff and—" "I know. You knew I was oblivious? I knew you had no reason to notice." I paused. Neither of us chose the way they raised us, but we can choose what happens next. More silence. "Do you hate me?" "No." And I meant it. I don't have the energy to hate anyone. I just want to move forward. Can we maybe get coffee sometime? Start over?" I thought about my sister. About the girl who'd gotten everything and still ended up empty-handed in a different way. "Yeah," I said, "I'd like that," I said. 2 months after graduation, I stood in my new apartment in Manhattan. It was small, a studio really, one window overlooking a brick wall, kitchen the size of a closet. But it was mine. I'd signed the lease with money from my first paycheck at Morrison & Associates, one of the top financial consulting firms in the city. Entry-level position, long hours, steep learning curve. I'd never been happier. Dr. Smith called on a Saturday morning. "How's the big city treating you?" "Exhausting. Exciting. Everything they warned me about," she laughed. That sounds about right. I'm proud of you, Francis. I hope you know that. I do. Thank you for everything. Rebecca visited the following weekend. She walked into my studio, looked around, and declared it exactly as small and depressing as expected. Then she hugged me so hard I couldn't breathe. You did it, Frankie. You actually did it. One evening I found a letter in my mailbox. Handwritten. 3 pages. My mother's looping script. Dear Francis, I don't expect you to forgive us. I'm not sure I would if I were you. She wrote about regret, about the 1,000 small ways she'd failed me, about watching me on that stage and realizing she'd been looking at a stranger who was also her daughter. I know I can't undo what happened, but I want you to know. I see you now. I see who you've become. And I am so, so sorry I didn't see you sooner. I read the letter twice. Then I folded it carefully and put it in my desk drawer. I didn't reply. Not yet. Not because I was punishing her, but because I needed time to figure out what I wanted to say, if anything. For once, the choice was mine. Okay, we're almost at the end. But I have to ask, if you were in my shoes, would you forgive your parents? Comment yes if you'd forgive them. No if you wouldn't. Or maybe if, like me, you'd need time. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. We've got so many more stories like this one coming. All right, here's how it all ended. I used to think love was something you earned, that if I was smart enough, good enough, successful enough, my parents would finally see me, that their approval was a prize at the end of some invisible race. 4 years of struggle taught me something different. You can't make someone love you the right way. You can't earn what should have been given freely. And you can't spend your whole life waiting for people to notice your worth. At some point, you have to notice it yourself. I look at my life now, my apartment, my job, my friends who chose me, and I realize something. I built this, every piece of it, not out of anger, not out of spite, but out of necessity. My parents' rejection didn't break me, it rebuilt me. The girl who sat in that living room 4 years ago, desperate for her father's approval, she doesn't exist anymore. In her place is a woman who knows exactly what she's worth and doesn't need anyone else to validate it. Some nights, I still think about them, about the family dinners I wasn't invited to, the Christmas photos without my face, the $250,000 they spent on my sister while I ate ramen in a rented room. It still hurts sometimes. I don't think it ever stops hurting completely, but the hurt doesn't control me anymore. I've learned something that took years to understand. Forgiveness isn't about letting someone off the hook. It's about releasing your own grip on the pain. I'm not there yet, not fully, but I'm working on it. And for the first time in my life, I'm working on it for me. Not to make anyone else comfortable, not to keep the peace, just for me. 6 months after graduation, my phone rang. Dad. I almost let it go to voicemail, almost. Hello? Francis. His voice sounded different, tired. Thank you for picking up. I wasn't sure I would. Silence. Then, I deserve that. I waited. I've been thinking, every day since graduation, trying to figure out what to say to you. He paused. I keep coming up empty. Then just say what's true. Another long pause. I was wrong. Not just about the money. About everything. The way I treated you. The things I said. The years I didn't call, didn't ask, didn't... His voice cracked. I have no excuse. I was your father. And I failed you. I listened to him breathe on the other end of the line. I hear you, I said finally. That's all? What did you expect? I don't know. I thought maybe you'd tell me how to fix this. It's not my job to tell you how to fix what you broke. More silence. You're right. He sounded older than I'd ever heard him. You're absolutely right. But I took a breath. If you want to try, I'm willing to let you. You are? I'm not promising anything. No family dinners, no pretending everything's fine. But if you want to have a real conversation, honest, no deflecting, I'll listen. That's more than I deserve. Yes, it is. He laughed, a small, broken sound. You've always been the strong one, Francis. I was just too blind to see it. Yeah, I said. You were. We talked for a few more minutes. Nothing profound. Just two people trying to find common ground across years of wreckage. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a start. It's been 2 years since graduation. I'm still in New York, still at Morrison and Associates, though I've been promoted twice. I'm starting my MBA at Columbia this fall, paid for by my company. The kid who ate ramen and slept 4 hours a night? She'd hardly recognize me now. But I haven't forgotten her. I carry her with me every day. Victoria and I meet for coffee once a month. It's awkward sometimes. We're learning to be sisters as adults, which is strange because we never really were as kids. But she's trying. I can see that now. I'm sorry I didn't see it, she told me at our last coffee date. All those years, I was so focused on what I was getting, I never asked what you weren't. I know. How do you not hate me for that? Because you didn't create the system, you just benefited from it. My parents came to visit last month, first time in New York. It was uncomfortable, stilted. Dad spent half the time apologizing. Mom spent the other half crying. But they came. They showed up at my door, in my city, in the life I built without them. That meant something. I'm not ready to call us a family again. That word carries too much weight, too much history. But we're something, working on something. Last month, I wrote a check to Eastbrook State's scholarship fund. $10,000. Anonymous. For students without family financial support. Rebecca cried when I told her. Frankie, you're literally changing someone's life. Someone changed mine. I thought about Dr. Smith, about the coffee shop shifts at dawn, about the night I bookmarked the Whitfield Scholarship, never believing I'd actually win it, about how far I've come, and about how far I still want to go. If you're watching this and something in my story resonated with you, if you've ever been overlooked, underestimated, or told you weren't good enough by the people who were supposed to love you most, I want you to hear this. They were wrong. They were always wrong. Your worth is not determined by who sees it. It's not a number on a check or a seat at a table or a place in a photo. Your worth exists whether or not a single person on this planet acknowledges it. I spent 18 years of my life waiting for my parents to notice me. I spent 4 more proving that I didn't need them to. And you know what I finally learned? The approval I was chasing was never going to fill the hole inside me. Only I could do that. Some of you are estranged from your families. Some of you are still fighting for scraps of attention. Some of you are just starting to realize that the love you're getting isn't the love you deserve. Wherever you are in that journey, I want you to know it's okay to protect yourself. It's okay to set boundaries. It's okay to decide that you matter more than keeping the peace. And it's okay to forgive, but only when you're ready, not a moment before. You don't need your parents, your siblings, or anyone else to confirm what you already know. You are enough. You always have been. Take a look in the mirror and say it out loud. I am enough. That's the first step. The rest? That's up to you. But I believe in you. Because if a girl who is called not worth the investment can stand on a stage in front of 3,000 people as a Whitfield scholar, you can do anything. Thank you for staying until the end. If this story meant something to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And leave a comment. What part resonated with you the most? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss our next story. There are more family drama stories waiting for you in the description below. See you in the next one. Leave. Only family is allowed here. My father said that to me, at my own sister's wedding, after I'd spent 18 hours on a plane to be there. I was standing on a gravel path lined with white peonies, carry-on still in my hand, listening to a string quartet play through the doors of a venue I wasn't allowed to enter. My mother stood 2 steps behind him and said nothing. 3 days later, she called about a bill, a $38,000 bill, with my name on it. For a wedding I wasn't allowed to attend. What I said next made her go completely silent. Before I go on, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with this story. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I love knowing where you all are. My name is Athena. I'm 34. I work in compliance consulting out of London. Now let me take you back to 4 months ago, the day I received a wedding invitation I never should have trusted. Growing up in the Sinclair household, there were 2 versions of childhood happening under one roof. There was Paige's version, the one with homecoming dresses and a used Honda Civic waiting in the driveway on her 16th birthday, paid for by a father who called her "my little star" without a trace of irony. And there was mine, the version where I filled out my own college applications at the public library because nobody reminded me the deadlines were coming. My father, Gerald, ran a small building supply store on the south side of Charlotte. He talked about it like it was an empire. In reality, it was a cinder-block building with a leaking roof and 3 part-time employees who never stayed longer than a season. My mother, Donna, kept the house and kept the peace, which mostly meant agreeing with whatever Gerald said and redirecting any tension toward the path of least resistance. That path was usually me. Paige was 5 years younger, effortlessly charming, and genuinely believed the world arranged itself around her because she deserved it. I don't say that with bitterness. I say it because it's the operating principle that everything else grew from. I left home at 18 with a partial scholarship to UNC Charlotte and a savings account I'd built from tutoring fees. Nobody drove me to campus. Nobody helped me move in. I didn't expect them to. 7 years ago, at 27, I took a position with Whitfield and Crane Consulting in London. Compliance analysis, the kind of work where you read contracts line by line, looking for what doesn't belong. I was good at it. I'd been training for it my whole life without knowing. I bought a 1-bedroom flat in Canary Wharf. Small, clean, mine. Every square foot paid for with money I earned. I didn't leave home. Home left me first. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday in late September, tucked inside a heavy cream envelope with a foil-pressed return address. Crane and Company Stationery. I recognized the weight. Somebody had spent real money on this. Inside, a formal invitation to the wedding of Paige Sinclair and Tyler Redmond to be held at the Whitmore Estate, Charlotte, North Carolina. December 14th, black tie optional. The Whitmore Estate. I looked it up. A restored plantation-style venue with crystal chandeliers, manicured boxwood gardens, and a starting price of $25,000. For a family that couldn't afford to fix the AC in the building supply store, this was a reach. What stopped me was the note Paige had tucked inside. Handwritten on a separate card, her loopy script. "It wouldn't be complete without you. Please come. P. 7 years. In 7 years, my parents had called me exactly when they needed something. A cosign question Gerald quickly retracted, an opinion on a medical bill Donna wanted me to translate. Paige called on birthdays sometimes. Christmas was a group text. And now this. An invitation and a personal note. A request that sounded almost like it meant something. I booked the flight that weekend. London Heathrow to Charlotte Douglas, economy, $1,400 round trip. I told myself I wasn't going because I'd forgiven anything. I told myself I wanted to see if they'd changed. There's a difference between forgiveness and curiosity. I was holding on to the second one with both hands. Rachel Torres, my closest friend from college, now a paralegal at Barnes and Whitfield in Charlotte, texted me when I told her, "You're actually going? Bold move." I should have listened to her tone. I landed at Charlotte Douglas on a Friday evening in December. The terminal smelled like Cinnabon and jet fuel, and everything felt both familiar and foreign. The drawl of the gate agents, the humidity clinging even in winter. I picked up a rental at the Hertz counter and drove to the Hilton Garden Inn near the University District. I never stayed at my parents' house when I visited. That had been true for years. Nobody questioned it anymore. From the hotel room, I called Paige. It rang 5 times. "Hey," she said too brightly. "You made it?" "Just checked in. Anything I should know about tomorrow?" "Just be at the venue by 2. Ceremony starts at 3. Her voice had that clipped quality, the kind that means someone's in a room with other people and doesn't want to say much. "I gotta go. Rehearsal stuff. See you tomorrow?" "See you tomorrow." She hung up before I could say anything else. I called my mother next. Donna picked up on the second ring, and the first thing she said landed like a stone in still water. "Oh, you actually came? I thought, well, the flight was so long, I figured you'd change your mind." I sat on the edge of the hotel bed in my Burberry trench coat, Rimowa suitcase still standing upright by the door, and let that sentence settle. She didn't say she was glad. She didn't say she'd see me tomorrow. She said she thought I wouldn't show up. I told her I'd be at the venue by 2 and ended the call. Something was off. I could feel it the way you feel a change in cabin pressure. Nothing visible, just a shift that makes your ears ring. I didn't sleep well that night. Saturday, December 14th. I wore a fitted navy dress I'd bought on Regent Street for exactly this occasion. Low heels, pearl studs. Nothing showy. Just enough to say I belonged somewhere, without trying too hard to prove it. The Whitmore estate sat at the end of a long gravel drive lined with bare magnolias strung in white lights. Through the tall front windows, I could see the flicker of chandeliers. A string quartet was warming up, something by Pachelbel, floating out over the boxwood hedges. My father was standing at the entrance, not inside greeting guests, not at the altar waiting for Paige. Standing outside, on the gravel, hands in the pockets of a charcoal vest I'd never seen before, next to a leased Cadillac Escalade that still had the dealer plate on it. He saw me coming and stepped forward. "Athena, you need to leave." I stopped walking. "Excuse me?" "Only family is allowed. You weren't invited." I held up the invitation. The actual, foil-pressed Crane and Company invitation with my name on it. "I have the invitation right here, Dad." "That was a mistake. You shouldn't have come." I looked past his shoulder. Through the glass doors, I could see Paige in a white Vera Wang gown, laughing with a bridesmaid. Donna stood near the entrance in a lavender mother-of-the-bride dress, watching us through the window. She didn't come outside. She didn't wave. "Dad, don't make a scene. The guests are inside. Walk away." I didn't beg. I didn't cry. Not in front of him. I turned around, pulled my Rimowa back across the gravel, and walked to the rental car. I didn't cry until the doors were locked and the engine was running. And even then, I didn't cry for the wedding. I cried because I'd let myself hope. Back at the Hilton, I sat on the bed in the same navy dress, shoes still on, and stared at the muted television for what might have been an hour. The room smelled like industrial carpet cleaner and the lavender sachet I always pack in my carry-on. A world away from chandeliers and Pachelbel. I called Rachel at 8. "They did what?" Her voice came through sharp enough to cut glass. I told her everything. Gerald at the gate, Donna watching through the window, Paige laughing inside in Vera Wang, while I stood on the gravel holding an invitation nobody honored. "I want to go home," I said. "I'm going to rebook my flight." "Don't, not yet." "Rachel, listen to me. Something about this doesn't add up. They sent you an invitation. Paige wrote you a personal note. You flew 18 hours, and they turned you away at the door?" I heard her set down a coffee mug. "People don't do that unless they need something from you, or unless they're hiding something." I wanted to argue. I wanted to say that my family was fully capable of casual cruelty without an ulterior motive, that sometimes people hurt you simply because they can and because you're there. But Rachel had spent 6 years as a paralegal. She'd learned to hear the thing underneath the thing. "Just give it a few days," she said. "Stay in Charlotte. If nothing happens, fly home Sunday. But something's going to happen. I can feel it." I didn't believe her. I pulled up the British Airways site on my laptop, scrolled through available seats for the next morning. My finger hovered over confirm. I didn't click it. Maybe some part of me could feel it too. 3 days passed. Nobody called. I stayed at the Hilton, working remote from the desk by the window, reviewing audit files for a Zurich-based client who didn't care that my personal life was falling apart. That was the comfort of compliance work. Contracts don't have feelings. They just say what they say. On Monday, I made the mistake of opening Instagram. Paige's feed had exploded. The Whitmore estate in golden hour light. Paige and Tyler under an arch of white roses. The cake. 5 tiers. Buttercream. Probably $2,000 by itself. Hashtags. Hashtag Sinclair wedding. Hashtag the perfect day. Hashtag forever Redmond. 47 photos. Not one of me. Not one mention. As though I didn't exist. As though I'd never flown 18 hours, or stood on that gravel drive, or held an invitation that was supposed to mean something. Then I saw my mother's post. Donna had uploaded a collage. Paige as a baby, Paige at prom, Paige with Gerald at the altar. And at the bottom, a photo of me and Paige as kids, maybe 8 and 3, sitting on the porch in matching sundresses. The caption, "So proud of both my girls." I stared at that word, both, until it stopped making sense. She'd posted "both my girls" for the audience of cousins and old neighbors who followed her, for the narrative. She couldn't very well explain why one of her girls wasn't in any of the wedding photos, so she reached a decade into the archive for proof of inclusion that no longer existed. Meanwhile, Paige posted a teaser. "Honeymoon countdown, Bali here we come," with a tagged location at the Four Seasons Resort. I closed the app, shut the laptop, and ate vending machine crackers for dinner. Some performances you can watch, others you can only survive. Tuesday morning. My phone rang at 9:15. "Mom." I almost didn't answer. But the compliance analyst in me has a rule. You don't dodge a call when you don't know what the other side is holding. "Athena," Donna's voice was stripped of all warmth. "No hello. No how are you. We need to discuss the bill." "What bill?" "The venue, the Whitmore estate. The total is $38,000. A pause, thin as a wire. "How will you pay?" I sat up straighter. "Mom, what are you talking about? I didn't hire a venue." "You signed the contract. You're the guarantor. Your name is on the agreement." The room tilted. I hadn't signed anything. I hadn't been asked to sign anything. I hadn't even been told there was a contract. I never signed a single document for that wedding. Shuffling on the other end. Then Gerald's voice, hard and close. He'd taken the phone. "Don't play dumb, Athena. Your name is on that contract. You're the guarantor. You owe this family." "I owe this family? For a wedding you kicked me out of?" "We'll talk about that later. Right now you need to handle the bill." "Dad, I didn't sign anything." "Then who did? A ghost?" I pressed my palm flat against the desk. My heart was hammering, but my voice stayed level. "You keep saying contract and my signature. I'm telling you, I have never signed a guarantor agreement for the Whitmore estate or for anyone." He hung up. I sat in that hotel room and let the words loop. Contract, your signature, guarantor. I knew exactly what those words meant. I read contracts for a living. I knew what a forged signature meant under the law, and I knew what questions to ask next. That was the moment I stopped being hurt and started paying attention. I called the Whitmore estate at 10:30 that same morning. The front desk transferred me to event coordination. A woman named Karen Mitchell picked up, professional, measured, the kind of voice that manages hundreds of anxious brides and doesn't flinch. Ms. Mitchell, my name is Athena Sinclair. I'm calling about the Sinclair-Redmond wedding held at your venue on December 14th. I understand there's a guarantor agreement associated with the event. Yes, we do have a guarantor on file for that booking, an Athena Sinclair. That's my name, but I did not sign that document. Silence, the kind that tells you someone just stopped typing. Ms. Sinclair, can you repeat that? I'm telling you that I never signed a guarantor agreement for this wedding. I was not asked, and I was not present. I'd like to request a copy of the document. More silence. Then carefully. Ma'am, if what you're saying is accurate, this would be a serious matter for our legal department. I understand. I'm requesting a copy through whatever formal channel you require. I can provide government-issued identification to verify that I am who I say I am. She told me the process. Submit a written request, include a copy of my passport for identity verification, and the legal team would email a scanned copy within 48 hours. I thanked her, hung up, and drafted the request letter in 12 minutes. Attached a scan of my passport photo page, sent it certified. Then I called Rachel. It's real, I said. There's a contract with my name on it, and I never signed it. Rachel was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. Okay, now we work. I had 48 hours before the contract copy arrived. 48 hours to decide what kind of person I was going to be. The calls started Wednesday. Aunt Caroline went first. She had the warm but firm tone of a woman who'd already rehearsed her speech. Athena, honey, your mother is beside herself. She says you promised to cover the venue and now you're backing out. I know things are complicated, but think about your parents' health. I didn't promise anything, I wanted to say. But I recognized the script. Donna had already seeded the story. Uncle Roger followed with an email, 4 paragraphs long, single-spaced, subject line, family first. The core argument, family isn't about contracts, it's about love. Don't let money destroy us. It read like a eulogy for a relationship he'd never actually maintained with me. Cousin Beth sent a text. Just pay it. It's easier for everyone. 23 members of the extended Sinclair family. 22 of them were getting the same narrative, that I had made a commitment, that I was breaking it, that I was selfish and cold and choosing money over blood. I screenshot every message, every voicemail, every email. Compliance training teaches you one thing above all else. Document everything, especially when the story being told isn't yours. Then my phone buzzed with a text from a number I almost didn't recognize. Cousin Dylan. Hey, something feels off. Mom keeps saying you promised, but I don't think that's the whole story. Want to talk? Dylan was Aunt Caroline's son. 26, quiet, worked in IT. He'd always been the observer in the family, the one who watched while everyone else performed. I typed, not yet, but keep your eyes open. He replied with a single thumbs up. One person, out of 23. One person who thought to ask. I saved the thread and closed my phone. The contract was on its way. Paige called Thursday afternoon. I was sitting at the hotel desk reviewing a risk assessment for work when her name lit up my screen. Athena. No warmth, no sister voice, just the flat tone of someone calling to close a deal. You need to just pay the bill. You make 6 figures. 38,000 is like a month's salary for you. You kicked me out of your wedding, Paige, and now you want me to pay for it? That was Dad's decision. I didn't want to, but you didn't stop him either. Silence. Look, she said, Dad handled the contract months ago. It's done. Just pay the bill and we can move on like adults. I never signed anything. Whatever, Dad handled it. Dad handled it how exactly? I don't know the details. I just know your name is on the form. Just write the check and stop being dramatic. You can afford it. I leaned back in the chair and looked at the ceiling. The popcorn texture, the faint water stain near the vent. $38,000 for a wedding where I wasn't allowed past the gravel. Paige, can you say one honest thing to me? Did you know Dad put my name on that contract? The silence lasted 5 seconds. When you're counting, 5 seconds is a canyon. It doesn't matter, she said. It matters to me. You left this family, Athena. You moved to London and disappeared. You don't get to come back and play victim. I ended the call, set the phone face down on the desk. My hands were steady, not because I was calm, because something had shifted. She knew. She'd known the whole time. And she didn't care. Okay, I need to pause here for a second. You just heard what Paige said. Just write the check. Like $38,000 for a wedding I got kicked out of is pocket change. Here's my question for you. If your sibling called you with that exact line, what would you say back? Option 1. Sure, I'll pay, right after you apologize on camera. Option 2. I'd rather set the money on fire. Or option 3. Tell me your own answer in the comments. And if you haven't hit subscribe yet, now's the time. This story is about to turn. Friday morning, Gerald called again. This time his voice had a sharpness to it, the kind a man puts on when he's rehearsed in the mirror. I talked to a buddy who does real estate law. He says the guarantor contract is legally binding. You have 30 days to pay, or the venue will pursue legal action against you. A buddy, not a lawyer. A buddy who does real estate. I almost felt sorry for how thin the bluff was. Did your buddy also mention what happens if the guarantor's signature was forged? Dead air, the kind that has weight to it. Nobody forged anything, Gerald said, slower now. You're making things up to get out of what you owe. I owe nothing for a wedding I was locked out of, Dad, and I'll have the contract in my hands by this afternoon. We'll see whose name is really on it. You think you're so smart with your London job and your fancy apartment? A judge won't care about any of that. You're welcome to take me to court, but I'd strongly suggest you talk to a real attorney first, not a buddy. You ungrateful. He hung up before he finished the sentence. I didn't need him to finish. I'd been called ungrateful so many times the word had lost its edges, like a stone tumbled smooth in a river. But here's what I noticed. He didn't deny the forgery. He deflected, he threatened, he attacked. But when I said the word forged, he went silent first. He went silent before he said a single word. That silence told me everything. Rachel texted at noon. Contract should hit your inbox today. Ready? I was ready. I'd been ready since the day I learned to read fine print for a living. Donna called that same evening, alone this time. No Gerald in the background. Her voice had shifted registers, softer, shakier, threaded with tears that may or may not have been real. Athena, I'm begging you. Your father can't sleep. If the venue takes legal action, we could lose the house. Mom, you could lose the house because someone forged my name on a contract. Don't use that word. Her voice tightened. We didn't forge anything. We used your information because we had no choice. There it was, buried inside a denial, a confession. You had no choice? You had the choice to pick up the phone and ask me. You would have said no, and that should have been the end of it. A long breath. I could hear the kitchen clock ticking through the phone, the same brass clock that had hung above the stove my entire childhood. You've always been like this, she said, and the softness evaporated. Cold, even as a child. Your sister needed this wedding. Your father and I. Our credit is ruined since the business. The venue required a guarantor. We had your social security number, your tax records. They were in your old room. So you took my personal information and signed my name without my knowledge. We didn't steal anything. You're our daughter. That's what family does. Family asks, Mom. Family doesn't steal. You don't know what it's like. You sit in London in your little apartment and you have no idea what we've been going through. I know exactly what you've been going through, because you just told me. You went through my personal documents, forged my name on a legal agreement, and then locked me out of the event so I wouldn't find out. She was crying now. I couldn't tell if it was guilt or frustration. I let the silence do the work. By Saturday, the family campaign had reached full volume. Aunt Caroline left a voicemail so polished it could have been dictated by Donna herself. Think about your parents' health, sweetheart. Your mother has been having chest pains. Is $38,000 really worth your father's heart? Uncle Roger sent a second email, shorter this time, with the subject line, disappointed. One line stood out. We didn't raise you to be this kind of person. We. As though he'd had any hand in raising me at all. Cousin Beth forwarded a group text meant for someone else, an accident presumably, that read, "She's being impossible. Mom says she won't budge." The group text she'd meant to forward from was a family chain I'd never been added to. 22 people, all discussing me, none of them speaking to me. Then Dylan texted again. Aunt Donna is organizing a family brunch next Sunday at Mom's house. She keeps saying it's to discuss the situation. But from what I'm hearing, I think she's going to pressure you publicly. Heads up. I read it twice. A family brunch, an audience, a stage. Donna was assembling the jury. What she didn't know was that the contract was arriving any hour. And what she couldn't imagine was that I might walk into that brunch with the only thing she was afraid of, the truth, on paper. I texted Dylan back. I'll be there. Then I called Rachel. They're setting up a public intervention, I said, next Sunday. Good, Rachel said, and I could hear her smiling through the phone. Let them. 22 family members, one narrative, and not a single person had asked to see the contract. That was about to change. Saturday night, alone in the hotel room, I almost quit. I had the British Airways site open on my laptop. A seat on the Sunday morning flight to Heathrow, row 34, aisle, for a change fee of $260. My cursor sat on the confirm button like a hand on a doorknob. London was 18 hours away. My flat, my desk, my life that made sense. Rachel showed up at 9 with 2 coffees from the lobby and didn't knock. She used the spare key card I'd given her on Wednesday. Close the laptop. I'm just looking. You're running. She set the coffee on the nightstand and sat at the foot of the bed. And running is what they're counting on. Gerald is banking on the fact that you'll fly back to London, eat the bill quietly, and never make him explain himself. I don't care about making him explain himself. This isn't about explanation. It's about making sure they can never sign your name again. On anything. Ever. That sentence landed differently than anything else she'd said all week. The venue's legal team should be sending the contract copy by Monday at the latest, she said. Just wait. One more day. I looked at the screen. Row 34A. The change fee. The departure time. One more day, I said. One more day. I closed the laptop. Rachel stayed for another hour. We didn't talk about the wedding or the contract. She told me about a case at her firm, a landlord dispute, a tenant with receipts. Normal things, human things. After she left, I lay in the dark and listened to the ice machine humming down the hall. One more day, that's all she asked for. I almost said no. I didn't sleep, not really. At 2 a.m, I was lying on top of the hotel comforter, still dressed, staring at a ceiling I'd memorized over 11 nights. I could have drawn the water stain from memory, the shape of it, like a country on a map nobody visits. My mind went somewhere I don't usually let it go. I was 14. I'd won the regional science fair, a project on water filtration using activated charcoal. Second place in the state. The school gave me a small trophy and a certificate in a plastic frame. My mother was supposed to come to the ceremony. She didn't. Gerald was supposed to drive me. He was taking Paige to buy new cleats for soccer instead. I rode the city bus home alone. Trophy in a plastic bag on my lap because I didn't have a backpack big enough. When I got home, I put the trophy on the kitchen counter. The next morning, it had been moved to the top of the refrigerator, behind a cereal box. Paige's soccer team photo was still front and center on the door. Lying in that hotel room 20 years later, I understood something I'd been avoiding. I didn't fly 18 hours for a wedding. I flew 18 hours to see if they'd finally open the door. And they hadn't. The cruelest part wasn't being turned away. It was realizing I still showed up hoping they wouldn't. At some point I must have slept, because I woke at 7 with my shoes still on and a headache behind my eyes. The coffee Rachel had left was cold on the nightstand. My phone had one notification. An email from the Whitmore estate. Subject line: Document request, Sinclair event. I sat up, opened it, and everything changed. Before I could open the attachment, my phone rang. Gerald. 7:15 on a Sunday morning. Athena. His voice had that practiced steadiness, a man gripping the wheel on a road he knows is icy. I hope you've had time to think clearly. The venue has been very patient, but they won't wait forever. Funny you should call right now. There's nothing funny about this. I talked to my buddy again, the real estate guy. He confirmed, a guarantor contract is enforceable. You signed it. End of story. Did your buddy also tell you what happens if the guarantor's signature was forged, Dad? Because I asked you that last time and you hung up instead of answering. The pause was longer this time, a full 4 seconds. No one forged anything. You keep saying that word like it means something. It means a felony in North Carolina. That's what it means. Another pause. I could hear him breathing. Shallow, deliberate. You want to play lawyer? Fine. But don't come crying when a judge sees that contract with your name in black and white. I won't be crying, Dad. I'll be handing over my passport with my actual signature on it, and we'll let the handwriting do the talking. You're unbelievable. After everything I have the contract, by the way. Silence. Total silence. The venue emailed it this morning. I'm looking at the attachment right now. I could hear him swallow. It was the loudest sound on the line. We'll see whose story holds up, I said. He hung up without another word. No bluster this time. No buddy. No ungrateful. Just a click, and then the dial tone. I opened the attachment. But I didn't look at the contract yet. I needed coffee first. I needed to be completely steady. While the Keurig brewed, my phone lit up. Dylan. He'd sent a screenshot. A capture from the family group chat, the one I was never added to. I zoomed in and read. Donna. Athena refused to honor her commitment. She's always been selfish. I don't know where we went wrong with her. Gerald. She makes over $200,000 and won't help her own sister. Let that sink in. Paige. I didn't want to say this, but she's always been jealous of me, even when we were kids. Aunt Caroline. Maybe we should all go no contact with her. She clearly doesn't value family. Uncle Roger. Heartbreaking. Gerald and Donna deserve better. 22 people, all building a version of me that didn't exist. A selfish, cold, jealous woman who broke a promise and abandoned her sister. A woman who had money and chose cruelty. None of them had seen the contract. None of them had asked to. They didn't need facts. They had a story, and stories are easier to believe when they come from your mother. I screenshot the entire thread, every message, every timestamp. Then I opened a notes file and organized them chronologically. Compliance training. Document everything, especially when the narrative is being written without your consent. Dylan followed up. Sorry, I thought you should see it. Thank you, I replied. I mean it. He sent back. Whatever you're planning, I'm on your side. I set the phone down and looked at the laptop screen, where the email from the Whitmore estate was still open. The attachment. 1 PDF, 11 pages. They were busy writing the story of who I was. They just didn't know I could read. I opened the PDF. Page 1. Venue details. The Whitmore estate, December 14th, Sinclair Redmond wedding. Event package, Grand Magnolia. Total cost, $38,000. Page 2. Payment terms. 50% deposit due upon signing. Remainder due within 30 days post-event. Page 3. Guarantor agreement. A separate signature page, clean and official. The guarantor section read, I, Athena Sinclair, hereby guarantee full payment of the remaining balance in the event that the primary contracting parties default. And there at the bottom, a signature. Athena Sinclair. But it wasn't mine. I stared at the handwriting. Whoever signed it had tried to replicate my script, the long tail on the A, the way I loop the S. But the pen pressure was wrong. The slant was too steep. The lowercase letters didn't connect the way mine do. It looked like someone had practiced from a sample, an old tax return maybe, or a bank form, and gotten close enough to fool a venue coordinator who had no reason to question it. Close enough to fool a stranger, not close enough to fool me. I set the laptop next to my passport, open to the photo page. My real signature sat right there in navy ink. Firm, clean, unmistakable. The two signatures didn't match. "That's not my signature," I said out loud in an empty hotel room. "And I can prove it." I called Rachel. She picked up on the first ring. "I'm looking at it," I said. "How bad?" "My name. Someone else's handwriting. It's not even close, Rachel." She exhaled. "That's textbook forgery. Under North Carolina law, a forged guarantor agreement is void from the start. It never existed. You have zero liability." I leaned back in the chair. They didn't just lie about me. They became me. On paper, in ink, without permission. Rachel came to the hotel within an hour, laptop under her arm, and a legal pad already half covered in notes. We sat at the small desk by the window, 2 coffees and the PDF filling the screen between us. "Here's what we do," she said, uncapping a pen. "First, you write a formal letter to the venue's legal department. State that you did not sign the guarantor agreement. State that the signature is not yours. Request that they initiate a verification process." And I attach my passport page with my real signature for comparison. Exactly. We also include a brief statement of facts. You were not present when the document was signed, you were not informed of its existence, and you did not authorize anyone to sign on your behalf. I drafted the letter in 20 minutes. Rachel proofread it twice, tightened 2 sentences, and added a line about preserving the original document for potential forensic analysis. "What happens when the venue confirms the forgery?" I asked. "All $38,000 falls back on the actual contracting party, your parents, Paige." "And if the venue reports it to law enforcement?" Rachel looked at me over her reading glasses. "Forgery is a Class H felony in North Carolina, up to 25 months. But that's the venue's decision, not yours. All you're doing is telling the truth." I nodded. "I don't want to press charges." "You don't have to, you just have to tell the truth." I sent the letter with supporting documents at 2:14 p.m. via certified email. Read receipt requested. Then I sat back and looked at the ceiling. "Now what?" I said. "Now we wait for the venue to respond, and we get ready for that brunch," she smiled. I didn't, but I didn't book that flight home either. Tuesday afternoon, Dylan texted again. "Brunch is confirmed for Sunday. Aunt Caroline's house, noon. Your mom keeps calling it a family discussion. She's told everyone the goal is to help Athena see reason." I read the message in a coffee shop near the hotel. Outside, Charlotte's winter light was thin and gray, and the parking lot smelled like cold asphalt and someone's drive-through breakfast. Help Athena see reason, which meant sit me at a table surrounded by people who'd already decided I was wrong, and apply pressure until I wrote a check. I texted Rachel. "They're setting the stage. Sunday, Aunt Caroline's house." Rachel. "Are you going?" "Yes." "You sure?" "They want a public conversation. They'll get one, just not the version they rehearsed." The plan was straightforward. I'd bring 3 things: the contract copy with the forged signature, the letter I'd sent to the venue, and my passport open to the signature page. No speeches, no accusations, just paper. Let the documents speak. That's what I do for a living. Lay documents on a table and let the room recalculate. Dylan confirmed the guest list. Gerald and Donna, Paige and Tyler, Aunt Caroline and Uncle Roger, Cousin Beth, Cousin Dylan, a handful of others, maybe 15 total, 15 people, 1 forged signature, and a family that had been told a story about me that wasn't true. Donna had organized this brunch to corner me. She'd arranged the seating, controlled the narrative, primed the audience. She thought she was building a trap. She was building my stage. I ordered another coffee, opened my laptop, and reviewed the contract one more time. Every clause, every line, every letter of the name that someone else had written. My name. Nobody signs it but me. Thursday morning, the venue's legal department replied. The email was short and professional, the way serious things always are. Dear Ms. Sinclair, we have received your formal claim regarding the guarantor agreement associated with the Sinclair Redmond event. Upon preliminary review, we are initiating a signature verification process. During the course of this investigation, all collection activity directed at you has been suspended. We will notify all parties of the outcome upon completion. I read it 3 times. Then I forwarded it to Rachel. They wouldn't suspend collection unless they saw a discrepancy, Rachel said when she called. This is real. They believe you. 2 hours later, a second email arrived. This one wasn't from legal. It was from Karen Mitchell, the event coordinator, sent from her personal Whitmore estate address with a subject line that just said FYI. Ms. Sinclair, I shouldn't be telling you this, but I've been thinking about it since your call. I was the one who processed the original guarantor paperwork. The person who dropped off the signed form was an older gentleman. He submitted the document at our front desk and signed it while standing at the counter. I remember because he seemed rushed. An older gentleman, at the front desk, signing a form with someone else's name. Gerald. My father walked into that venue, picked up a pen, and wrote my name as though it belonged to him. As though I belonged to him. I saved both emails, printed copies on the Hotel Business Center's printer, added them to the folder, contract copy, venue investigation letter, Karen's statement, passport signature page, 4 documents, clean, organized, unambiguous. I tucked the folder into my carry-on and zipped it shut. Sunday was 3 days away. The brunch was set. The audience was assembled. All that was left was showing up. Sunday morning. I ironed a white cotton blouse and paired it with a navy blazer, dark trousers, low heels. Professional. Controlled. The outfit of someone who came to present facts, not feelings. The manila folder sat on the desk. Contract copy, venue letters, passport page. I went through them one last time. Everything in order. Everything legible. Rachel called at 10. How are you? Steady? Good. Call me the second it's over. I drove to Aunt Caroline's house in the rental, a brick colonial in the Dilworth neighborhood with a wide front porch and a minivan in the driveway. 3 other cars were already parked along the curb. Gerald's pickup, the Escalade must have been a rental for the wedding, Uncle Roger's Buick, and a silver Honda I assumed was Paige and Tyler's. I sat in the car for a full minute, engine off, hands on the wheel, 15 people inside. Most of them had already made up their minds about me. Most of them had been fed a version of events that painted me as the villain, the wealthy sister who made a promise and broke it, who chose money over family. I reached for the folder on the passenger seat, felt the weight of it. 4 documents, 11 pages, 1 truth. Then I got out, locked the car, and walked up the front steps. The door was unlocked. Inside, the smell of quiche and fresh coffee. Voices from the dining room, low, serious, the sound of a family bracing for confrontation. I stepped into the room. 15 faces turned. Gerald saw me first. His jaw tightened. Donna offered a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Paige looked at the floor. There was no empty chair at the table for me. Cousin Dylan stood up and pulled one from the kitchen. All right, we're about to walk into that brunch. I've got the contract copy, the venue's letter, and my real signature for comparison. My question for you, what do you think I should do first? Option 1. Put the contract on the table immediately and let the paper speak. Option 2. Let Gerald and Donna tell their version first, then take it apart piece by piece. Or option 3. Something I haven't thought of. Tell me in the comments. And if you've watched this far, you already know this story deserves a share. Gerald stood at the head of the table, silver fork resting on the edge of his plate, untouched quiche in front of him, the posture of a man who believes he owns every room he enters. I want to thank everyone for coming, he said, as though this were a board meeting and not an ambush. We're here because of a difficult situation. Athena made a commitment to help with Paige's wedding. She signed a contract with the venue, and now she's refusing to honor it. Aunt Caroline nodded. Uncle Roger crossed his arms. The room had already chosen a side before I sat down. Donna spoke next, dabbing her eyes with a cloth napkin. We didn't want this to become public. We've always handled things privately, but Athena has left us no choice. The performance was polished. Gerald played the aggrieved patriarch. Donna played the heartbroken mother. They'd rehearsed this, or at least they'd lived inside the lie long enough that it felt like truth. Then Paige. She was sitting next to Tyler at the far end of the table, eyes red-rimmed, voice small. I just wanted my sister at my wedding. I wrote her a personal note. I invited her. And now she's turned everything into a fight about money. Tyler sat beside her, silent, his brow creased. He hadn't said a word. Gerald looked at me from the head of the table with the steady gaze of a man who's certain the room belongs to him. Athena, we're giving you a chance to do the right thing, in front of your family. I sat at the far end of the table, folder on my lap. I hadn't spoken a word. I let them finish. Every sentence, every rehearsed line, every tear. Let them build the rope. They'd need it. The chorus started on cue. Uncle Roger went first. Athena, we've always thought of you as the responsible one, the successful one. Just do the right thing. Aunt Caroline. Your parents could lose their home over this. Is that really what you want? Cousin Beth, barely looking up from her phone. You earn good money. Honestly, it's kind of embarrassing that this is even a conversation. Each voice landed like a stone tossed onto a pile. They weren't asking questions. They were delivering verdicts. Through it all, I watched Tyler. He was leaning back in his chair, looking from Gerald to Donna to Paige with an expression I recognized. The expression of someone hearing a story for the first time and realizing it doesn't match the one they were told. He leaned toward Paige and whispered, just loud enough for me to catch. What contract? Paige put a hand on his arm. Shh. I'll explain later. Tyler didn't look away from her. His jaw shifted. Gerald, emboldened by the room's compliance, turned to me with something approaching triumph. See? Even your family agrees. You made a commitment. We have the contract. You signed it. Aunt Caroline. Just say yes, Athena. Just say you'll cover it, and we can all move forward. 15 faces, 14 of them waiting for me to break. One, Dylan, at the corner of the table, watching me with quiet attention, as though he could see the folder on my lap. Gerald spread his hands. She can't even defend herself. She knows she signed it. I looked at him, held his gaze for 3 full seconds. Then I stood up. The chair scraped the hardwood. The room went quiet. I've been listening, I said. Now it's my turn. I opened the manila folder and placed the first document in the center of the table, the guarantor agreement, printed on Whitmore Estate letterhead. This is the contract everyone's been talking about. The guarantor agreement for Paige's wedding at the Whitmore Estate. My name is on it. I pointed to the signature line. But that is not my signature. Then I placed my passport beside it, open to the photo page. My actual signature. Firm, slanted slightly left, the looped S and the long-tailed A that I've written the same way since I was 17. This is my real signature. Look at them side by side. Aunt Caroline reached for the contract first. She held it next to the passport, squinting. Uncle Roger leaned in. Cousin Beth set down her phone for the first time all morning. The signatures weren't close. Not when you looked. Not when you bothered to look. The Whitmore Estate has confirmed they are investigating the forgery, I said. I placed the venue's letter on the table, the suspension of collection, the formal investigation. During the investigation, All collection activity against me has been suspended. Gerald's face had gone the color of wet cement. That's ridiculous, he said. You signed it over the phone or electronically. Dad. I kept my voice level. The venue's event coordinator confirmed that an older gentleman submitted this form in person and signed it at the front desk. The room processed that sentence in real time. I watched it land, on Aunt Caroline's face, on Uncle Roger's, on Tyler's. Gerald's mouth opened. Nothing came out. For the first time in my life, I watched my father have nothing to say. Aunt Caroline spoke first. She set the contract down on the table as though it had burned her fingers. Gerald, is this true? You signed her name? It was for Paige. His voice cracked on the second word. We had no other option. Our credit was destroyed after the store went under. The venue required a guarantor. We didn't. You committed forgery. Uncle Roger stood up from his chair, his face flushed from the collar up. On your own daughter's name. Gerald, do you understand that's a felony? Donna reached for Gerald's arm. We were desperate. You don't know what it's been like. Desperate? Aunt Caroline's voice was ablade. Donna, I asked you last month, to your face, if Athena had agreed to help. You looked me in the eye and said yes. Donna said nothing. At the far end of the table, Tyler pushed his chair back and turned to Paige. Wait. You told me your parents were covering the venue. You told me Athena was just helping with flowers. Paige reached for his hand. Tyler, sit down. You knew? His voice wasn't loud. It was worse than loud. It was the voice of someone recalibrating everything he thought he knew about the person sitting next to him. You knew your dad forged your sister's name on a contract and you said nothing? It was complicated. It's a crime, Paige. It's not complicated. It's a crime. The room had split. Gerald and Donna on one side, pinned, exposed. Paige beside them, trying to hold Tyler's hand while he pulled away. And me, standing at the end of the table with an open folder, saying nothing more. I didn't need to. The documents were doing exactly what documents do. The room was fracturing, voices overlapping, Donna crying, Uncle Roger demanding answers, Tyler staring at Paige like he'd never seen her before. I raised one hand. I'm not done. Silence. Immediate. I'm not pressing charges. That's not why I'm here. I looked at each person at the table, one by one. But I want everyone in this room to understand 3 things. I held up one finger. I never signed that contract. I have 0 legal or moral obligation to pay a single dollar of the $38,000. Second finger. I flew 18 hours to be at Paige's wedding. I stood outside that venue with an invitation in my hand, and I was turned away at the door by the same person who forged my name, because he was afraid I'd find out. Third finger. I don't hate anyone in this room, but I will not carry debts that were never mine, and I will not apologize for refusing. Donna's voice came through the tears. Athena, please. Mom. I lowered my hand. I'm done being the person you call only when you need something signed, or paid, or blamed. Gerald still hadn't spoken. He was staring at the contract on the table like it was a mirror. I gathered the documents, slowly, deliberately, and returned them to the folder. Kindness is not a contract, I said, and being family is not a blank check. I tucked the folder under my arm, walked past the table, past the quiche and the coffee and the silence. Cousin Dylan met my eyes as I passed. He gave a small nod. I walked out the front door, down the porch steps, and into the thin December light. Nobody followed me. But this time, the silence didn't feel like rejection. It felt like respect. I was halfway to the rental car when I heard them through the open dining room window. Tyler's voice, tight, controlled, but carrying. You lied to me about the money. You lied about your sister. What else did you lie about, Paige? Tyler, I didn't lie. We handled it differently than... Your father committed a felony, and you knew. It wasn't like that. Then tell me what it was like. Because from where I'm standing, I married into a family that forges documents and throws people out of weddings to cover it up. I didn't linger. I got in the car, set the folder on the passenger seat, and started the engine. In the rear-view mirror, I saw Cousin Dylan walk out the front door and down the porch steps. He came to the driver's side window. "That took guts," he said quietly. "You're the one who sent me the screenshots. You did plenty." He shoved his hands in his jacket pockets. "Uncle Gerald hasn't looked up from the table. Aunt Donna is locked in the bathroom. Paige is trying to keep Tyler from leaving." "Is he leaving?" "I don't know. But he said he needs space. I heard Paige say something about canceling the honeymoon." I let that settle. 4 Seasons Bali. The trip they'd teased on Instagram 3 weeks ago, gone. Athena. For what it's worth, most of the room is on your side now. Aunt Caroline told Uncle Gerald he should be ashamed. And that's Aunt Caroline. "Thanks, Dylan." He stepped back. "Drive safe." I pulled away from Aunt Caroline's brick colonial and didn't look in the rearview mirror again. The highway was empty, and the sky was wide and gray, and I drove with the radio off, because some silences are earned. Monday morning. I was in the hotel lobby, checking out at the front desk, when the email arrived. From the Whitmore Estate, Legal Department. Subject, Guarantor Agreement, Determination. Dear Ms. Sinclair, following our investigation, including handwriting comparison and witness statements from venue staff, we have determined that the guarantor signature on the event guarantee agreement dated August 12th does not match the verified signature of Athena Sinclair. Accordingly, the guarantor agreement is hereby voided in its entirety. All financial liability for the outstanding balance of $38,000 reverts to the primary contracting parties, Gerald Sinclair and Donna Sinclair. A revised invoice will be issued to the primary parties under separate cover. I read it standing at the counter, suitcase handle in one hand, phone in the other. Voided, in its entirety. The desk clerk asked if I needed anything else. I said no. I walked to the car and sat in the driver's seat and read the email one more time. Then I called Rachel. "It's done," I said. "Tell me." "Voided. All of it. Liability reverted to Gerald and Donna." She let out a breath. "You owe nothing." "I owe nothing." A second email had come in while I was on the phone. The venue's revised invoice, sent to Gerald and Donna. I was CC'd. "Please remit payment of $38,000 within 60 days. Failure to comply will result in legal action. 60 days. $38,000. For a wedding they threw to prove they were something they weren't, signed with a name that wasn't theirs to use." I set the phone in the cup holder and drove to the airport. The flight home was 18 hours. I slept for 14 of them, the deepest I'd slept in weeks. Paige called 3 days later. I was back in London, standing in my kitchen in Canary Wharf, watching the Thames go silver in the late afternoon light. Her voice was different, smaller. The bravado was gone. "No, just write the check. No, you can afford it." "Tyler canceled Bali," she said. "He says he can't trust me until I'm honest about everything." "That sounds like a conversation you should have with your husband, Paige. He wants me to use the honeymoon deposit to help pay the venue, $8,000. Are you going to?" Silence. Then, "I think I have to." I poured hot water over a tea bag and let the pause sit. "Athena, I need help. Would you talk to Tyler? Tell him I'm not a bad person. Tell him I just..." "No. Please. That's your marriage, Paige. Those are your words to find. I can't be your bridge. Not when you're the one who burned ours." She was crying now. Not the performative tears from the brunch. Real tears. The kind that come when you've run out of angles and the only thing left is the shape of what you did. "I was wrong," she said. "I know I was wrong." Knowing isn't the same as fixing. Then how do I fix it? You start with the truth. With Tyler. With yourself. You stop treating other people's names like resources you're entitled to. The call ended a minute later. No resolution, no group hug, just two sisters separated by an ocean and a forgery, and the distance that honesty creates before it heals. I drank my tea by the window and watched a barge move slowly down the river. Some things take time. I was learning to let them. Gerald called on a Thursday. Late afternoon his time, evening mine. I was reviewing a client report at my desk when his name appeared on the screen. I almost didn't answer. But the man who called wasn't the man I expected. The venue is threatening to sue. His voice had no edge, no authority. It sounded like a voice that had been folded and put away. I'm going to have to sell the truck, and some of the equipment from the store. You put yourself in this position, Dad. I know. 2 words. No deflection, no buddy with legal advice, no ungrateful. Just, I know. I didn't think. He trailed off, started again. I thought you'd just pay. I thought that's what you do. I thought because you had the money, you thought I'd cover it and never ask questions. Yes. Because that's what I've always done. Handled things quietly, flown back to London, not made a scene. Yes. I looked out the window at the lights along the wharf. A crane was working on a new building across the river, its red light blinking in the dark. There's something else, he said. The venue was just the big one. I also signed your name on the rental agreement for the tables and chairs. Another $4,500. $42,500 total. In my name. Without a word. Dad, I'm not going to lecture you. The venue has voided the contract. I'm out. Whatever happens next, the payments, the truck, the legal consequences, those are yours. I'm sorry, Athena. I hear you. I mean it. I know you do, but sorry doesn't erase a forged signature, and it doesn't erase being told I'm not family at my own sister's wedding. He was quiet for a long time. I know, he said again, and hung up. I'd already been back in London for a week by then, but the story kept settling like sediment in a glass, slowly, layer by layer, until you could see through to the bottom. The morning after Gerald's call, I went for a walk along the Thames before work. The river was the color of pewter and the air was cold enough to sting. I passed the same joggers, the same man walking his terrier near West Ferry Circus. My phone buzzed. Aunt Caroline. Athena, I owe you an apology. A real one. I should have asked for your side before I took anyone's word. I'm sorry. Then Uncle Roger. A text this time, not an email. I said things I shouldn't have. I was wrong. Cousin Dylan. You're the strongest person I know. Seriously. I read each message on a bench near the river. 3 apologies from people who'd been ready to cut me off a week ago. But nothing from Gerald. Nothing from Donna. Nothing from Paige. The 3 people who actually owed me the words. I put my phone away and watched a tourist boat cut through the gray water. Winning didn't feel the way I expected. I'd imagined something clean, a sense of closure, a door clicking shut. Instead, it felt like cleaning out a wound. Necessary. Unavoidable. But it still stings. Rachel called that evening. How are you? Honestly. Honestly? Relieved, sad, tired. All 3 at once? All 3 at once. That sounds about right. She told me about a new case at her firm, a contractor dispute, nothing dramatic. Normal things, human things, the same kind of grounding she'd given me in the hotel room that night when I almost booked the flight home. Some people hold you up by being extraordinary. Rachel held me up by being steady. 3 months later, life looked different for everyone. Gerald sold the Cadillac Escalade. It turned out to be a 36-month lease he'd taken out specifically for the wedding, another performance, and liquidated what was left of the building supply inventory. Between the truck, the equipment, and a small loan from Uncle Roger, he managed to pay $22,000 toward the venue debt. The remaining balance, roughly $20,000 including the table rental, was being negotiated into a monthly payment plan, $500 a month. Gerald and Donna's retirement timeline pushed back by at least 4 years. Donna got a job, For the first time in 30 years, she was working, part-time cashier at a grocery store on Sardis Road. I heard this from Dylan, not from her. Paige and Tyler were still together, but the honeymoon was gone. Paige had surrendered the $8,000 Bali deposit toward the venue debt. They were in couples counseling. Tyler's condition for staying. He'd told Paige that financial transparency wasn't optional anymore. Every account, every statement, every dollar accounted for. The venue chose not to pursue criminal charges. In most civil matters like this, they don't. A payment plan is cheaper than a prosecution. Gerald would not have a felony record. He'd have a debt, a damaged reputation, and the knowledge that he'd been exposed in front of every person whose respect he'd spent a lifetime performing for. Then, in March, a letter arrived at my flat. No return address on the envelope, but I recognized the handwriting, Donna's careful, slanted print. It was short, 1 page. I have no right to ask for anything, but I want you to know that I'm learning what it means to earn a relationship instead of demanding one. I set the letter on my kitchen table, next to my tea. I didn't write back, not because I was angry, because I wasn't ready. And for the first time, I let that be enough. London carried on. The Thames changed color with the seasons, pewter to slate to something close to green when spring arrived. I went to work. I read contracts. I caught discrepancies that saved clients money they'd never know about. And I went home to my flat in Canary Wharf and made tea and looked out the window. But something had shifted. I started saying yes to things I used to decline. A colleague's dinner invitation, a weekend trip to Edinburgh with Rachel. She came to visit in April. A phone call from cousin Dylan that lasted an hour and covered nothing important and everything that mattered. For years, I'd confused self-reliance with isolation. I'd built a life that was clean and ordered and entirely mine, and somewhere along the way, mine had started to mean alone. The trip to Charlotte didn't fix that, but it cracked the wall enough to let light in. In May, I called Paige. It was a short call. No mention of the contract, the venue, or the $38,000. No apologies, no accusations. Just two sisters talking for the first time in a way that didn't have an agenda underneath it. "How's work?" she asked. "Busy, good busy. How's Tyler?" We're working on it. Counseling helps." "Good." "Athena?" "Yeah?" "I'm glad you called." That was all. No grand reconciliation, no tearful forgiveness montage. Just a door left open. Not because anyone earned it yet, but because keeping it shut was costing me more than I realized. Strength isn't about carrying everyone's weight. It's about knowing which burdens are yours, and putting down the ones that aren't. I'd put mine down, and my hands were finally free. It's evening in London now. The sky over Canary Wharf is that particular shade of blue it gets in late spring, deep at the edges, pale gold where the city lights meet the river. I'm sitting at the window in my flat with a cup of Earl Grey that's gone lukewarm, which is how I prefer it, if I'm being honest. I think about that day sometimes. The gravel path, the white peonies, the string quartet playing through the doors of a venue I wasn't allowed to enter. "Leave. Only family is allowed." My father said that to me in front of a door he'd already closed. And in a way, he was right. Only family was allowed. The problem was, he'd forgotten who his family actually was. He forgot that family isn't a performance you stage for an audience. It isn't a contract you sign with someone else's hand. It isn't a bill you slide across a table and expect someone to pay because they happen to share your blood. Family is the people who show up, not because they owe you, but because they choose to. It's Rachel, who brought cold coffee to a hotel room and told me to close the laptop. It's Dylan, who sent a screenshot that changed everything. It's the version of Paige who called in May and said, "I'm glad you called," and meant it. I look at my passport on the shelf. The signature inside is mine. Clean, certain, unforged. My name is Athena Sinclair. I'm 34 years old. I work in compliance. I live alone in a flat by the river, and I'm learning, Still learning that saying no to what hurts you is the same thing as saying yes to who you are. Nobody signs my name but me. And that's enough. That's finally enough. That's my story. And if you're still here, thank you. If this resonated with you, I'd love to hear. Option 1. Have you ever had to set a boundary with your own family, even when it cost you something? Option 2. Have you ever been the family ATM, the one everyone calls when they need something but never when they don't? Or option 3. Tell me something completely different. Your story, your words, drop it in the comments. And if you want more stories like this one, check the description. I've linked a few that hit just as hard. Until next time, remember, your name, your signature, belongs to you. Don't let anyone write it for you.
I'm Beth Sinclair, and the year I turned 26, my own mother told me to stop being her problem. My husband had been dead 11 days. I stood on her porch with 2 one-year-olds asleep in the back of the car, asking for 3 weeks and a couch. And she looked at me the way you look at a bill you didn't expect. I'll tell you exactly what she said. But first I want you to hold her face in your mind, because 8 years later that same face would freeze on my land, in front of 300 people, waiting for a check that was never coming. None of them saw it coming. Not my mother, not my father, not my brother. They thought the story ended the night the porch light went dark. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where ordinary people meet impossible family, and the quiet ones learn the loudest lessons. If betrayal, gratitude, and slow burn justice are your thing, you're in the right place. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from, and be sure to subscribe. This one begins in the cold, and it ends with $100 million and a single sentence that emptied a room. Let me take you back to that porch. Daniel died on a Tuesday in October, pinned under a tractor that rolled on a slope he'd graded 100 times. He was 28. I was 26. And our twins, Caleb and Hannah, had just learned to clap. The hospital called at 4:11 in the afternoon. I remember the time because I was warming bottles, and the microwave still had 11 seconds on the clock when I picked up. They asked if I could come. They didn't say why on the phone. They never do. I drove 40 minutes with my hands at 10 and 2 and my mind perfectly, terribly blank. I signed 3 forms at a counter and my signature came out steady, which felt like a betrayal of its own. A nurse asked if there was someone I could call. I said yes. I lied. The truth was I had a lease ending in 19 days, $400 in checking, and a life insurance policy Daniel kept meaning to set up and never did. We were ranch poor and young and sure we had time. People our age always think they have time. That night, I sat on the kitchen floor between 2 cribs and did the math out loud, because saying numbers kept me from saying anything worse. Rent, daycare, the truck payment, diapers in 2 sizes. I counted it twice and got the same answer both times, which was no. I had exactly 2 doors left to knock on, and I'd already decided which one I'd try first. It was the wrong one. I'd find that out by morning. My parents lived 90 minutes east, in a brick house with a wreath on the door for every season. I'd grown up there being useful. My younger brother Travis got the soccer fees and the new cleats. I got the part-time job and the speech about responsibility. I told myself that made me the strong one. I drove there with the twins because I had nowhere else, and I knocked. And my mother, Linda, opened the door in her good cardigan and did not step aside. I asked for 3 weeks, a couch, a corner, anything, just until the insurance question sorted itself out and I could breathe. My father, Gary, hovered in the hall behind her and looked at his shoes. Travis cracked his bedroom door, saw it was me, and shut it again. My mother folded her arms across that cardigan and told me the family was stretched thin, that 2 babies was a lot to take on, that I was an adult now and adults handle their own messes. Then she said the thing I would carry for 8 years. We can't be your safety net, Bethany. The babies stirred in the car. The porch light buzzed. I said, okay, because what else do you say? And I carried 2 car seats back down the steps while my mother watched from behind the screen door, and somewhere between the second step and the truck the light clicked off. Like even the house was done with me. I didn't cry until the county line. Then I called the only other number I had. I called Ruth Sinclair, Daniel's mother, only to tell her I was struggling. That was all. I didn't ask for a thing, because asking had just cost me the last of something I couldn't name. Ruth listened for maybe 20 seconds. Then she said, "Where are you right now?" And I told her the gas station off Route 9, and she said, "Don't move." 40 minutes later, Walt Sinclair's truck pulled in beside mine, headlights washing over two sleeping babies, and the old man got out without a word and started transferring car seats, like he'd done it 1,000 times. Ruth came around the passenger side carrying a blue quilt stitched with white stars, the one she'd made when the twins were born, and she wrapped Caleb and then Hannah in it, right there under the fluorescent lights. Then she pressed something warm into my hands. It was a chipped casserole dish the color of a marigold, foil over the top, still hot, like she'd grabbed it straight off the stove on her way out the door. I started to say I couldn't. I didn't want to be a burden, and Ruth cut me off the way only a kind woman can, gently and completely. She looked at Walt and said, "Set 2 more plates, they're ours now." That was it. No conditions, no speech about adults handling their messes. 7 words in a gas station parking lot. I followed their taillights 40 miles out to a struggling little horse operation in Cedar Hollow, Texas, and I didn't know it yet, but I'd just met my real family for the first time. The Sinclair place was 80 acres of good intentions and bad luck. A barn that needed a roof, a fence line that needed everything, and a mortgage Walt didn't talk about in front of company. They put the twins in Daniel's old room and me across the hall, and for the first week I mostly stared at the ceiling and listened to horses move in the dark. Here's the part nobody at my mother's house ever bothered to learn about me. I had a degree in equine science, earned over 6 years of night classes and double shifts at a vet clinic, paid for entirely by me. I knew bloodlines, I knew conformation, I knew the difference between a horse that was sound and a horse that just hadn't broken down yet. So on day 9, when Walt walked me out to show me the stock, I stopped cold at a stall in the back. There was a bay mare in there, 4 years old, with a left front leg that turned in just slightly at the knee. Walt said she was going to the sale Saturday, that nobody wanted a crooked-legged mare, that he couldn't afford to feed what he couldn't sell. I stood at that stall for a long time. Everyone who'd looked at her had seen a cull. I watched her move 3 steps across the straw and saw something else entirely, the way that turned-in leg let her load and push off a hair faster than a straight-legged horse ever could. I asked Walt to give me until spring. He looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Then he looked at the mare. Then he nodded. Her name was Juniper. She was the first thing I'd chosen in 11 days. I want to be honest about who I was back then, because it isn't a flattering picture, and I'm done pretending otherwise. I was not brave. I was terrified. And I turned that terror into work, because work was the one language I trusted. I took every odd job within driving distance. I broke colts for neighbors at dawn, drove a feed route midday, and came home to muck stalls and read genetics papers until my eyes crossed. Walt offered me a wage from the operation and I refused it for 4 months, because owing the Sinclairs anything felt like a debt I couldn't survive defaulting on twice. Ruth started leaving plates outside my door because I'd stopped sitting at the table. One night Walt found me asleep standing up in the wash rack, hose still running, and he turned the water off and said quietly, "Beth, nobody's keeping score out here." I didn't believe him. I'd spent my whole life believing love came with an invoice attached, and you couldn't unlearn that in a season. The bank had given the Sinclairs 18 months before they'd start the foreclosure conversation. I knew that number the way I knew my own pulse. So I slept 4 hours and got up and did it again. And I called that strength. And I told myself the twins were lucky to have a mother who never quit. It took me years to understand that working yourself to the bone isn't always discipline. Sometimes it's just fear wearing a nicer coat. But fear, pointed the right way, can build a thing. And I had a crooked-legged mare and a barn full of nothing, and I was about to find out exactly what it could build. It took 14 months to bring Juniper along. I didn't fight that leg. I built around it, conditioning her to use what she had instead of apologizing for it. By the following spring, she could stop on a dime and roll back faster than horses worth 10 times what she'd have brought at that Saturday sale. I entered her in a small reigning futurity 2 counties over, the kind with folding chairs and a concession stand that only sold hot dogs and coffee. I didn't expect anything. I just needed proof. For the bank, and for myself. Juniper drew an early slot, and when she ran her pattern, that turned-in leg let her sink into the ground on her stops like she was pouring herself into it. We placed third out of 41. Third. I stood in the dirt holding a green ribbon worth maybe nothing, and I felt the first solid thing under my feet in over a year. But here's the part that mattered more than the ribbon. An older woman in the second row of the bleachers had been writing in a leather notebook the whole time, and when Juniper made her final stop, the woman stopped writing and just watched. After, she found me at the trailer and asked one question. "Where did you get that mare's bloodline?" I told her I'd built it from a horse headed to slaughter. She studied me for a moment, the way Walt had studied Juniper, and then she handed me a card and said she'd be in touch. The card said Vivian Hargrove. I had no idea who she was. I'd find out, and it would change the size of everything I thought I was allowed to want. My parents called twice a year, like clockwork, like a subscription nobody could cancel. That December, the phone rang on Christmas morning while the twins were tearing into secondhand gifts Ruth had wrapped in newspaper and ribbon. It was my mother. The call lasted 4 minutes. She spent the first 3 on Travis, his new venture, a fitness franchise that was going to be huge, how proud they were, how he'd always had vision. Then she remembered I was on the line and asked how I was getting along out there at the in-laws. I said the kids were healthy, and I'd placed a horse at a futurity. There was a pause, the kind that tells you the person on the other end is checking the time. Then she said, "Well, that's nice," and asked if the twins were, and here is the thing I have never forgotten. She could not come up with their names. Not one. She said the babies. My children were almost 2, and my own mother called them the babies because she had never once asked. I said Caleb and Hannah like a correction, and she said, of course, and Travis needs the phone, happy holidays, and the line went dead. I stood in the doorway watching Hannah put a bow on Caleb's head while Ruth laughed from the kitchen, and I understood something with a clarity that didn't even hurt anymore. My parents remembered me exactly twice a year, and they had never once asked the names of the only grandchildren they had. I hung up and went to set the table, and I added 2 extra plates without being asked, because in that house, that was just what you did. Vivian Hargrove was not, it turned out, a nice older lady who liked horses. She was a name. 40 years in performance horse breeding, a reputation that opened gates from Texas to Kentucky, and a portfolio she'd built and then mostly sold off when her husband passed. She showed up at the Sinclair place that February in a truck worth more than the barn, walked the fence line with Walt, and then asked to see Juniper move. She watched for 10 full minutes without speaking. Then she turned to me and said, "You read that leg correctly," which most people with letters after their name would have missed, "and I want to know what else you can see." I told her the truth, that I thought Juniper's line could throw a whole generation of horses that ran the way she did, that the trait was heritable, and the market would pay for it if I could prove it across foals. Vivian asked how much capital it would take to find out. I'd run the numbers 100 times in the dark, so I gave her the figure without flinching. She didn't flinch either. She said she'd seen a lot of talent buried under a lot of bad luck, and she had no patience left for watching it stay buried. Then she said the words I'd been bracing against my whole life. "Let me invest in you." And the strange thing, the thing I'm not proud of, is that my first instinct was no. Because I'd learned what people meant when they offered to help. I'd learned it on a porch in October. So I didn't say yes. I said I'd need to see the terms in writing, every line of them, and Vivian Hargrove smiled like I'd just passed a test. I hired a lawyer with money I didn't have, a careful woman named Pat, who charged me in installments and earned every dollar. We spent 3 weeks on the agreement with Vivian, and I read every clause twice, out loud, until the language stopped being a foreign country. Vivian would fund the breeding program. In return, she'd hold a minority stake, clearly defined, with a clean buyout path if either of us ever wanted out. But the part I dug in on, the part Pat said most people in my position never think to protect, was the bloodline itself. The genetics, the breeding rights, the records, the future of Juniper's line, all of that I kept structured separately and entirely under my control. Vivian could have argued. A lot of investors would have. Instead, she read my red lines, looked up over her glasses, and said, "You're going to do just fine, aren't you?" I didn't fully understand yet why it mattered so much to me to own the thing itself and not just a share of the money it made. I think part of me was still standing on that porch, still hearing my mother price me out. I'd decided, somewhere down deep, that I would never again be in a position where someone else held the paper that decided my life. I learned something young that I've never had to unlearn. The people who love you sign clearly, the people who use you sign in fog. Vivian signed clearly, in blue ink, on a Tuesday. I signed under her. And when Pat slid the executed copies into a folder, I felt a click somewhere in my chest, the sound of a foundation setting. I didn't know it then, but I had just built the wall my whole family would one day break against. The first Juniper foal hit the ground in the spring, a leggy bay colt who stood up wrong and then moved right. And I knew within a week. He had it. That low, loading hindquarter. That hunger to stop. We named the program after the creek that ran the back of the property, and I bred carefully. 3 mares the first year, then 6, matching Juniper's line to outside blood that complemented the trait instead of canceling it. By the time that first colt was a 2-year-old, I had buyers calling who'd never returned my texts before. He sold at auction for a number that made Walt sit down on an overturned bucket and stay there a while. The money started, slow at first and then not slow. We fixed the barn roof. We paid the bank ahead of schedule, and the foreclosure conversation that had lived in my chest like a second heartbeat simply stopped. And one Sunday that fall, I fed the ranch hands lunch off the back of a flatbed, ladling stew out of a chipped casserole dish the color of a marigold, the same dish Ruth had pressed into my hands at a gas station 2 years before. She caught me using it and didn't say anything, just smiled and looked away. I'd gone from the woman being fed in a parking lot to the woman doing the feeding, and I'd done it out of the same dented dish. Word spread past the county and then past the state. People started saying the name of the program before they said my name, which was exactly how I wanted it. And somewhere 90 minutes east, in a brick house with a wreath for every season, a phone was about to start ringing in the other direction. My mother called on a Thursday in March. Not Christmas, not my birthday. A regular, unremarkable Thursday, which is how I knew immediately that something had changed. Her voice was different, warmer, rounded at the edges in a way I hadn't heard since I was small and useful. She asked how I was, and then she actually waited for the answer, which she had never once done. She asked about the ranch. She used the program's name correctly, which meant she'd heard it somewhere, which meant it had traveled. She asked about Caleb and Hannah by name, and the names came out a half-second slow, like she'd practiced them in the driveway before calling. I stood in the tack room holding the phone and felt the strangest thing, not warmth, not relief, but a cold, clean alertness, the kind you get when a horse you trust suddenly pins its ears. My mother was being kind to me. After 8 years, after a porch and a dark light and the babies. I asked her, evenly, how she'd heard about the ranch. She said, "Oh, you know how people talk. Your father saw something." She didn't say what. She said, maybe I could bring the kids by sometime, that family shouldn't be strangers, that life was short. And she'd seen a thing online about a young woman in horses doing very well for herself, and it had just made her think of me. It had made her think of me. I said I'd see, and I got off the phone. And I stood in that tack room for a long while, turning one question over and over like a stone in my hand. Why now? I didn't have the answer yet. In about a month, it would arrive in my inbox by accident. Travis called next because of course he did. The fitness franchise had not been huge. It had in fact closed 2 locations and was bleeding from a third, though I only learned the specifics later. What I got that day was the charm offensive, My little brother turning it on the way he had at every family dinner of our childhood. The easy laugh, the "we've got to catch up," the "I've been meaning to call." He talked for 10 minutes before he got to it, and when he did, he rapped it so softly I almost missed the shape of it. He needed a bridge. Just a bridge. Just till the next location stabilized, and he hated to ask, but family helps family, and he'd heard I was doing real well out there with the horses. He said a number. It was not a small number. I let the quiet sit, the way I'd learned to with a green colt, not pushing, just letting the pressure speak for itself. Then I said calmly, "Travis, I help people who showed up. You weren't there." He laughed, uncertain, and asked what that was supposed to mean. I told him exactly what it meant. I told him I'd stood on mom and dad's porch with 2 babies and an empty checking account, and he'd opened his bedroom door, seen me, and closed it. He said he didn't remember it like that. I said I did, and I remembered it like that every single day for a year. He got quiet, then he got cold, and he said I'd always been dramatic, and family was supposed to forgive. I said forgiveness and a loan are 2 different transactions, and I wished him luck. And I meant it. Then I hung up and went back to the barn where things made sense. The answer to why now arrived on a Tuesday, the way these things do, dressed up as nothing. Travis forwarded me an email by mistake. He had meant to forward it to my mother, I think, some logistics about a cousin's wedding, but his thumb caught the wrong contact, and underneath the new message sat the entire thread, scrolling back 6 years, the way email does when nobody bothers to trim it. I almost deleted it. Then a phrase caught my eye, my own name, and I scrolled. There it was, in black and white, a conversation between my mother, my father, and my brother from the spring after Daniel died. My mother had written it. She'd written that taking me in would have been throwing good money after bad, that I'd made my choices marrying a dirt-poor rancher, that some people are just a bad investment. My father had replied, agreeing, adding that they had to think about Travis's future, and then the line that hollowed me out and refilled me with something harder. My mother had written, "We keep it civil. We don't burn the bridge completely. Because you never know. If the ranch ever amounts to something, we'll want the door cracked." We'll want the door cracked. They hadn't forgotten me out of carelessness. They'd filed me away on purpose, an asset marked down, a position they'd hold in case it ever appreciated. The warm phone calls weren't a thaw. They were a quarterly review. I read it 3 times standing in the kitchen, and I waited for the wave of rage, and it didn't come. What came instead was something colder and far more useful: clarity. I printed it. I didn't print it for a lawyer or a lawsuit. I printed it so I would never again confuse what they were doing with love. I want to tell you I plotted some elaborate revenge that night. I didn't. I'm not built for schemes, and schemes have a way of curdling the people who run them. What I did instead was simpler and, I think, harder. I decided I would not give them a single hour of my anger. I would not call my mother and read the email back to her. I would not let Travis pull me into a fight he understood far better than I did. I would do the one thing my whole family had never expected me to be capable of, then or now. I would outbuild them. I would make something so solid, so cleanly and completely mine, that when the day came that they reached for it, their hands would close on air. That was the whole plan: build and structure and wait. By then, Juniper was 9 and a proven producer, the matriarch of a line that buyers across 3 states wanted a piece of, and her foals were the literal foundation of everything the program had become. I walked out to her stall that night and stood there in the dark the way I had on day 9, except now the barn had a new roof and the bank was paid, and 2 kids were asleep in a house that was warm. I scratched that crooked-legged mare under the jaw and thought about doors, the ones that close on you, the ones that open, and the ones you learn to build yourself, with hinges only you control. I wasn't going to fight my family. I'd already learned that you can't win an argument with people who keep their own books. I was going to make the books, and I was going to make them airtight, and I was going to do it quietly, starting the very next morning. You'd think people who wrote off a widow in an email thread would at least have the decency to stay away. Mine did the opposite. As the program's name got bigger, my family discovered a sudden public devotion to me. The first time I saw it, I was at a major futurity, the kind with real bleachers and a live stream, and my mother and Travis showed up uninvited, found me at the trailer, and turned into a Hallmark card the second a camera swung our way. My mother hugged me for the photographer from the regional horse magazine, her hand spread on my back like she was presenting me. Travis told a reporter, loud enough to carry, that the family had always believed in me, that they'd sacrificed so I could chase the dream. I stood there in their performance like a fence post they were leaning on for the picture, and I understood what they were building, because it was the mirror image of what I was building. I was assembling documents in a lawyer's office, quiet and unwitnessed. They were assembling a story, loud and witnessed, the story of a close family who'd stood by their girl through hard times. They were laying the groundwork to be standing right beside me when it paid off, so that no one watching would ever question why they got a piece. They dealt an image. They always had. My mother could make a room believe anything for the length of a photograph. So I let them have their photos, and I smiled the right amount, and I filed the moment away, because I'd already decided how this ended. They would build their image in public. And when the day came, I would answer it the only way that beats an image. With the truth. Out loud. In front of everyone they'd ever wanted to impress. There was one moment, just one, that nearly cracked me open. It was my father. He found me alone at the back of the trailer lot after the photos, away from my mother, and he stood there working his hat in his hands the way he did when he couldn't find a place to put himself. His eyes were red. He said, "Beth, I think about that night a lot." I waited. He said, "Your mother and I fought after you left, the worst fight of our marriage. And I sat in the truck at midnight with the keys in my hand, and I should have driven to you. I should have driven to you." For one suspended second I was 12 again, wanting so badly to believe my father would have come. Then I asked him the only question that mattered. "Dad, that was 8 years ago. Where are you standing now?" And he looked at the ground, and the silence stretched, and in that silence I got my answer more cleanly than any words could have given it. Because if he were standing with me, he'd have said so. Instead, he said something about it being complicated, about your mother, about not wanting to choose sides. He'd had 8 years and a confession halfway up his throat, and he still couldn't take one step out of her shadow. I didn't hate him. That's the strange part. I just saw him finally, all the way down, a man who felt the right thing and would never once do it. If you've ever had a parent who only loved you when you were useful, you already know the sound of that voice. Stay with me, because what happens at the ranch is the part I still can't believe I lived. Comment if this hits home, and subscribe so you don't miss how it ends. The offer came when Caleb and Hannah were 9 and I was 34. By then the program wasn't a ranch anymore. It was a brand. We had a training facility, a client list with a waiting list, and most of all we had the line. Juniper's descendants spread across the best barns in the country, every one of them tracing back to a crooked-legged mare a man had almost sent to slaughter. A Western lifestyle company, the kind that owns competitions and clothing labels and streaming shows, had been circling for a year. One afternoon their people sat across from me and Pat at my own kitchen table and slid a number across the wood. $100 million. For the land, the facility, the brand, and, they were very clear, the genetics, the breeding rights, the future of the line. I sat with that number for a moment, and I'll be honest with you, because I promised I would. It was not $100 million in a suitcase. Most of it was the value of the bloodline and the brand I'd spent 8 years building, structured over time, with part of it tied to how the line performed in the years after the sale. But the headline was real, and the headline was the kind of number that ends up in a regional magazine, then a national one. I asked for 2 weeks. They gave me 3. That night I walked out to Juniper's stall, 12 years old now and retired from the show pen to a soft paddock, and I leaned on the rail. Selling meant I would never again have to ask anyone on this earth for a place to sleep or a plate of food. Selling meant the door was finally, permanently, mine. I already knew I'd take it. The only question left was who I'd open the door for. I knew what I wanted to do with the money before I finished signing the sale, and I built it like I built everything. On paper. Airtight. With Pat at my elbow. 3 structures. The first was an irrevocable trust for Caleb and Hannah, locked so tightly that no charm, no lawsuit, no tearful Thanksgiving plea could ever pry a dollar loose. They'd be educated, secure, and free, and no one would ever stand on a porch pricing them. The second was for Walt and Ruth. The deed to the original 80 acres and the farmhouse, signed back to them free and clear, plus a funded account that would carry them comfortably for the rest of their lives, plus a real stake in the proceeds. Not a gift wrapped in obligation, just theirs. When I told Ruth, she put down the dish towel and said, "You don't owe us a thing, honey." And I said, "I know. That's exactly why." The third was the one that mattered most to me. The Daniel Sinclair Memorial Scholarship Foundation, funded for the long haul, to help young people get into equine science, with a specific preference written right into the bylaws for applicants raising children alone. I wrote that line myself. I made Pat read it back to me twice. Everything I did with documents, because documents were the only language my family couldn't argue with. They dealt in feelings and photographs and the elastic memory of who did what to whom. I dealt in signatures, witnessed and notarized and filed. By the time the sale was a month from closing, I had allocated every meaningful dollar to the people who'd shown up, and I'd done it in a form that could not be undone. I just hadn't told the people who hadn't shown up. They were about to find out the way they found out everything. From a distance, and too late. It leaked, the way $100 million anything always leaks. A regional business page ran it first, then the horse press. Then a national outlet picked up the angle they couldn't resist, the young widow who built an empire from a slaughter-bound mare. My phone, which had been quiet for years on the family front, came back to life like a thing possessed. My mother texted within 6 hours. "So proud of you. Always knew." Travis sent 3 messages, then 4, the last one just a string of those celebratory little graphics, like we'd won something together. My father called and left a voicemail saying he hoped we could all sit down soon, as a family, that he loved me. I stood in the kitchen reading it all, and I heard my mother's voice from 8 years ago as clearly as if she were standing in the room. "We can't be your safety net, Bethany." Except now they could see the size of the net I'd built, woven from nothing, while they watched from 90 minutes away. And every one of them was reaching for it. The woman who'd told me she couldn't spare a couch was now sliding into my texts with "so proud of you." The brother who'd shut his door was throwing me a parade through his phone. I didn't reply to any of it. Not out of cruelty, but because I'd learned that silence is its own answer, and a clear one. I had 3 weeks until the closing and the celebration I'd planned to go with it. A real event on the ranch. The horse community, the buyer's people, neighbors who'd watched me build this from a barn that needed a roof. I had not invited my family. It hadn't occurred to me that I'd need to make that explicit. I was about to learn that for some people, an invitation is optional. Travis stopped asking and started telling. The next call wasn't soft. The charm was gone, sanded down to something raw and entitled underneath, and I realized I was finally hearing my brother without the performance. He said the family deserved to be part of this. He said that. Deserved. He listed things, the way people do when they've built a ledger in their own favor and never showed it to the other party. All the sacrifices, all the ways they'd supposedly carried me, a childhood I apparently remembered wrong. Then he said the thing that told me exactly how this was going to go. He said, "Obviously we'll all be there for the announcement, and we should talk about what's fair." There was no question mark in his voice. He wasn't asking to be invited to my celebration. He was informing me that they were coming, and that a number would be discussed, and that I'd be unreasonable to suggest otherwise in front of everyone. They had spent a year building the public story of the loving family who stood by me. Now they meant to collect on it, on my land, in front of my people, where saying no would make me look like the villain. It was, I had to admit, a smart play. It was the only kind of play they knew. The leverage of a scene, the cost of looking cold. My mother had taught it to him at the dinner table for 30 years. I told Travis I'd see him at the event, which he took as a yes, and which was not a yes, and I hung up. Then I called Pat and told her to make sure every last document was signed, witnessed, and recorded before the date. Not after. Before. There would be nothing left to negotiate. I'd make sure of it. The week before the celebration, I closed every door but one. Pat and I sat at the kitchen table until the documents were a finished thing, not a plan, the trust irrevocable and funded, the deed to Walton Ruth recorded at the county office, the foundation chartered and capitalized. I read each signature line out loud one final time, the way I'd read Vivian's contract years before, until the language stopped being words and became a wall. By Friday, there was nothing left to give away, because I'd already given it to the right people, in a form that could not be reversed by tears or threats, or a scene in front of 300 witnesses. And I kept one thing for myself, the only thing the buyer agreed to carve out of the deal at my insistence. A single foal, a filly from Juniper's last cross, written into the contract as mine, retained. Not for sale at any price. She was a yearling that spring, bright bay with one white sock and a knee that turned in just slightly, exactly like her dam. And when Caleb and Hannah saw her, they argued for an hour over her name and finally agreed on June. After Juniper. The line would go on, smaller now, just ours, in a paddock the kids could see from their bedroom window. I stood at the fence the evening I finished the paperwork and watched the foundation mare and the young filly graze nose to nose. 11 years between them and the same crooked, beautiful leg. And I felt the foundation I'd been setting for 8 years finally, fully cure. Everything important was locked. Everyone important was protected. All that was left was the part I'd been bracing for since a phone rang on an ordinary Thursday. They were coming, and I was ready. My mother drove out to the ranch 2 days before the event. Alone. She hadn't set foot on Sinclair land in the 8 years it took me to build it, and now she came in her good coat and stood in my drive looking at the new barn, the arena, the brass nameplate by the gate. And I watched her do the math behind her eyes, the same math she'd done on a porch in October. She started warm. She always starts warm. She told me she was proud, that she'd always known I had it in me, that a mother knows. When that didn't move me, she shifted to grief, dabbing at eyes that weren't quite wet, telling me how hard it had been to watch me struggle from afar, how she'd cried for me. When grief didn't move me either, she found the floor she was really standing on. She said, "After everything I sacrificed for you, are you really going to embarrass this family in front of the whole county?" There it was. Not love. Leverage. The threat of a scene. The cost of looking cold. The exact play Travis had run, because she'd written it first. I didn't raise my voice. I just said, quietly, that I had nothing to embarrass anyone with, that I was simply hosting a celebration for the people who'd built this place with me. She heard the shape of what I wasn't saying and her face hardened. Behind me the screen door opened and Ruth came out wordlessly and stood at my shoulder, and without a sound she lifted the blue star quilt off the porch swing and laid it around my shoulders against the evening cold, the way she'd wrapped my babies in a gas station 8 years before. My mother looked at that quilt for a long moment, then she got in her car and left. The night before the celebration was clear and cool, and I couldn't sleep, so I did what I always did when I couldn't sleep. I went to the barn. The grounds were ready. A tent up by the arena, chairs in rows, a small wooden stage where I'd say a few words, and the foundation banner would unfurl. I'd invited the people who mattered. Vivian, who'd flown in, the ranch hands and their families, neighbors who'd hauled water during the dry year and never sent a bill. The buyers' representatives, Walt and Ruth, as guests of honor, seated front and center, though Ruth had grumbled that she didn't need a fuss. I had not invited my parents or my brother. I'd thought about it the way you think about whether to leave a gate open, and I'd decided, no. This day belonged to the people who'd shown up, and there was no seat in that arrangement for the people who hadn't. I sat on an overturned bucket in the dark, the same kind Walt had sat on the day the first foal sold, and I ran my words over in my head one more time. I knew exactly what I wanted to say, and I knew I wanted to say it calmly, because the calm was the whole point. The calm was the thing they'd never been able to take from me. June the filly nosed at my sleeve through the rails. Juniper dozed in the next paddock over. I'd planned every word of the next day down to the breath. What I had not planned, what I genuinely did not see coming, was that my family would simply walk through the front gate uninvited, the way you do when you've spent your whole life believing a closed door doesn't apply to you. The day came up gold and still. By 11 the arena lot was full, trucks and trailers and the buyers' black SUVs lined along the fence, and close to 300 people drifted across the grounds with cups of coffee and lemonade, talking horses and weather and the unbelievable thing this widow had built out here in the dirt. There was a long table of food under the tent, and I'd asked Ruth to bring her stew, and she'd made it in that same chipped marigold dish, scaled up to a roaster but ladled, at the end, out of the original, because some things you don't replace just because you finally can. I wore a clean shirt and good boots, and I shook 100 hands. Vivian found me and squeezed my arm and said, "You did exactly what I knew you'd do," and I told her she was the only person who'd ever bet on me with her own money instead of her opinions. Walt and Ruth sat in the front row near the stage, Walt in a tie he clearly hated, Ruth with the twins on either side of her in their good clothes, Caleb fidgeting, Hannah solemn and proud. The buyer's lead came over to confirm we were set to make it official from the stage. Everything was calm. Everything was exactly as I'd built it. I stepped up toward the little wooden stage with my few pages of words I didn't really need, and I scanned the happy, sunlit crowd one last time, the faces of every person who'd had a hand in this. And that's when I saw them. My mother, my father, and Travis, walking in through the front gate, dressed for a photograph, working the edges of the crowd like they owned the day. Uninvited, smiling, right on time. They moved through my people like dignitaries. My mother had on the good coat and a smile she could hold for an hour without it cracking, and she stopped to introduce herself to strangers as Beth's mother. "You must be so impressed, we always knew." Travis had positioned himself near the small cluster of press, the regional magazine, and a live stream camera, and I watched him lean toward a reporter and say, just loud enough, that the family had sacrificed everything to give me my start. That this was a story about what a family can do when they stand together. My father trailed behind them, hands in his pockets, eyes finding mine, and then sliding away. They were not here to celebrate. They were here to be seen celebrating, to plant themselves in the frame so that whatever came next, every photograph and every clip would show them at my side, the loving family, owed. My mother caught my eye across the crowd and lifted her hand in a little wave, confident, proprietary, the wave of a woman certain her seat was being saved. A few of the neighbors who'd known the real story years ago went quiet and still, the way a herd goes quiet when something walks the fence line that doesn't belong. Ruth's hand found Hannah's shoulder. Vivian raised one eyebrow at me, a question. I gave the smallest shake of my head. Not yet. I climbed the 2 steps onto the stage and the crowd began to settle and turn toward me, and my mother smiled out at all of them like she'd built the place herself, already arranging her face for the gratitude she was sure was coming. I set my unneeded pages on the podium. I looked at the people I loved in the front row. And then, I began. I didn't raise my voice. That was the whole point, and I'd promised it to myself the night before on an overturned bucket. The louder a thing is, the easier it is to argue with. So I started soft, and the crowd leaned in to hear me, which meant by the time I got to the part that mattered, 300 people were dead silent, straining toward every word. I thanked them for coming. I told them the short version of the truth, that 8 years ago I'd arrived in Cedar Hollow with 2 babies and nothing, and that the people who'd taken me in hadn't asked what I could do for them, they'd just set 2 more plates. I found Ruth's eyes in the front row. Then I said I had 2 gifts to give before we made anything official, and I wanted to give them in front of everyone because the right people deserve to be thanked out loud. First, I said, the foundation. I nodded and the banner unrolled behind me, and there it was, the Daniel Sinclair Memorial Scholarship, my late husband's name 20 feet tall over my shoulder, funded to help young people into the work that saved my life, with a preference for parents raising children alone. The crowd made that warm, low sound a crowd makes when something lands. And then, the second gift. I asked Walt and Ruth to stand. They did. Confused. Ruth pressing her hand to her chest, and I told the 300 people what I'd told no one outside a lawyer's office. That the deed to this land was already, as of this week, signed back to Walt and Ruth Sinclair, free and clear, theirs forever, along with everything they'd need to never worry again, because 8 years ago they'd given a stranger a home, and you don't repay that. You can only try to match it. Ruth started to cry. Walt caught her elbow. The crowd rose to its feet, and the applause rolled across the grounds like weather. And in the front rim of that crowd, 3 faces did not move. My mother's smile was still fixed in place, but it had stopped meaning anything. Frozen on a face that was rapidly understanding it had brought the wrong expression to the wrong event. Travis had gone white. My father was staring at the stage like a man watching a train he'd assumed would stop. I let the applause settle. Then I looked right at them. Just the 3 of them, and I said the only thing left to say, quietly, so the whole silent crowd could hear every word. Family isn't who shares your blood, it's who showed up. My mother found her voice first, and it was not the warm one. It was the porch voice, 8 years older and twice as sharp, and it came out of her before she could stop it. How dare you, she said, loud enough now that heads turned. How dare you humiliate your family in front of all these people? And there it was, the inversion I'd promised myself, the calm woman on the stage, and the loud one in the crowd, the exact reverse of a porch in October. Travis tried to rescue it, stepping forward, saying something about how this wasn't legal, that family had rights, that they'd contributed, words with no weight behind them because there were no documents behind them, only a story they'd told themselves. The buyer's lead quietly signaled 2 staff, who moved toward my family with the gentle, immovable politeness of people who do this for a living. My father didn't say anything at all. He just looked at me, and for one last second, the confession from the trailer lot flickered across his face. The thing he felt, and would never do. And then he looked at the ground, where he always looked, and let himself be guided toward the gate. My mother kept talking the whole way out, her voice getting smaller as the distance grew. After everything I did for you, after everything, until the gate closed and the words stopped, and the grounds were just my people again, 300 witnesses, and a silence that finally belonged to me. The celebration went on, because that's what celebrations do, and within 20 minutes the strangeness had folded back into music and food and the ordinary joy of people who like each other. But I slipped away from the tent for a minute, because I needed to. I walked back toward the house and sat on the porch swing, and Ruth came and sat beside me without a word, and somebody had left the blue star quilt folded over the arm of the swing, soft and faded now, 8 years of washings thin in the cotton. Ruth pulled it across both our laps, out past the rail, Juniper grazed in the gold evening light, and beside her June the filly mirrored her down to the crooked leg, 2 ends of a line nobody had wanted to bet on, but me. Caleb and Hannah ran across the grass toward us, breathless about something, the way kids are, and they piled onto the swing and under the quilt. And for a moment there were 4 of us tangled up in a faded blanket that had wrapped these same 2 babies in a parking lot once, when we had nothing. We didn't have nothing anymore, but that was never really the point. You probably want to know what happened to them, so I'll tell you, briefly, because they don't get to be the long part of my story anymore. My family hired a lawyer. Of course they did. The letter arrived a few weeks later, full of words like reasonable expectation and family contribution, and Pat read it once, set it down, and said it had all the legal force of a wish. There was nothing to contest. The trust was irrevocable, the deed was recorded, The foundation was chartered. I hadn't built a scheme they could break. I'd built a structure they could only stand outside of, which is exactly what I'd intended on a Tuesday 2 years before with a printed email in my hand. The letters stopped. Travis's franchise finally closed for good, the consequence of his own choices and not $1 of mine, and I won't pretend a small, tired part of me didn't note the symmetry. My father sent one more message, months later. No apology in it, just a line that said, "Your mother won't ever forgive this." As if that were news. As if it were my loss. I didn't reply. Walt and Ruth still live in the farmhouse on the 80 acres that are theirs, and the funded account means Ruth finally let Walt fix his knee and take her to the coast for a week, the first vacation of their married life. The foundation gave out its first scholarship the following fall, and I want you to know who got it, because it's the part I'm proudest of. A 24-year-old widow with a toddler, working nights, who wanted to learn equine science and had been told by everyone in her life that it wasn't practical for a girl in her situation. I read her essay 3 times. I called Pat and told her to make sure that one went through. Because 8 years ago, a woman knocked on the wrong door with 2 babies and got told she was a bad investment. I just wanted to be the right door for somebody else. I kept a smaller place after the sale, 20 acres down the road from Walt and Ruth, with a barn just big enough for what matters. I breed a handful of foals a year off June now, the filly with Juniper's leg, and I do it slow and careful, and for the love of it, not because a bank is counting. Juniper still grazes by the live oak where the kids can see her from the fence. Caleb wants to be a vet. Hannah wants to run the foundation someday, and I think she will. We eat dinner at a table with no empty seats and no hidden ledgers, and most nights it's nothing special, just stew and homework and a dog under the table, and that ordinary, unremarkable peace is the richest thing I own. It cost me $100 million to learn it was free all along. I spent the first half of my life believing I had to earn a seat at my own family's table, until 2 people I wasn't even born to simply set one for me, asked for nothing in return, and taught me the only lesson that ever stuck. Love that keeps a ledger was never love, it was just an invoice waiting to be sent. That's my story. One closed door, one open kitchen, and a crooked-legged horse nobody wanted but me. If somebody showed up for you when your own blood wouldn't, go tell them today. Don't wait for $100 million reason. And if this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment, tell me about the door that opened for you, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.